I call this meeting of the Hurst-Euless-Bedford Independent School District to order. Let the record show that a quorum of board members is present, that this meeting has been duly called, and that notice of this meeting has been posted in accordance with Texas Open Meeting Act, Texas Government Code, Chapter 551. Good evening to everybody. Welcome to our February work session. Tonight, the Board of Trustees is meeting in a called work session board meeting. The board welcomes and appreciates comments and input from the community. Open forum is provided at each meeting to allow the public to address the board. There will be two open forums tonight. Open forum number 1 is to hear requests regarding agenda items only. Open forum number 2 is to hear requests or make comments regarding non-agenda items and will be heard at the end of the meeting. Those addressing the board are asked to limit their comments to 3 minutes per meeting. The speaker should identify his or her name, group affiliation, if any, and make a brief presentation with an identified solution if one is sought. Remarks should be addressed to the board as a whole. Oral presentations may not include charges against any employee or board member by name. It is my responsibility to determine if the person addressing the board has attempted to resolve a concern informally or through the district's complaint policies. If not, the speaker will be directed to follow the appropriate policy. The board requests that all presentations be made in a courteous, respectful, and professional manner and asks that the speaker monitor their own behavior. If you wish to speak during one of the open forums, please fill out one of the cards located on the table in the entry hall. Superintendent's comments. Dr. Harrington.
You know, we had our Hall of Fame induction on Saturday, and I wanted to, again, congratulate our own Andy Cargile, who it was our first effort at the combined Hall of Fame, HEB Hall of Fame, and Sports Hall of Fame. And I wanted to thank Deanne Hollander and her team. It took a lot to combine those two processes and pull that off, so I wanted to thank her. The only other thing, this morning, I got to speak to the retired teachers, and I can't tell you how much I appreciate their ongoing support and their love for this district. And it was apparent, and really enjoyed that opportunity.
Thank you. Any clarifications required?
Yeah, a couple of clarifications. The State of the District report that we're working on, we were going to send out a timeline, and should have done that last week after all the ice and all that. I missed my meeting when we were going to develop that timeline, so we will be working on that, and we're going to get a new timeline out as to when to expect that. We do want to do it right, so we're not going to rush it, but we want to share that information. We're actually really excited about that. And then one other clarification. Mr. Brown had asked about some information on surveys. We're going to ask Lauren Allen to take a little deeper dive into that issue and what is going on. We've got some preliminary information, but I want a little more before we come back with that. So we'll be bringing that to you. Once we have a little, I can let Lauren take a look at it. I'll then have a more of a timeline. This is an issue that has bubbled up in other districts, and I really want to get a handle on what is the concern and what has happened. I want Lauren to really look at what process is going on. We do feel most of our surveys, if any surveys, we do very few, but we do want to know that we're meeting what we would think would be our normal expectations. All right, and that's all I have.
All right, thank you. All right, I have an announcement to make. Hurst-Euless-Bedford ISD is seeking citizens to serve on the district's facility planning task force to help evaluate HEB ISD's facility and provide input on the district's long-term facility plan. Ultimately, representatives from this group will report their findings and recommendations to the HEB ISD Board of Trustees. We have contracted with both Huckabee and Corrigan Architects to assist in gathering information from our stakeholders, coordinating community meetings, and providing communication resources needed for a successful facility task force initiative. Our goal is to select 40 to 50 task force members who represent a cross-section of our community. We want to ensure diversity and representation of all stakeholders and are seeking members from each area of the school district. We are hoping to include parents of current, former, and/or future students, business representatives, leaders from civic organizations and religious communities, alumni, former employees, current teachers, and a few high school students. If you or anyone you know is interested in being part of this task force, you may submit your name and information through a form that will be posted on our website tomorrow morning. Thank you. We're ready for open forum number 1. No cards. Then we will be going into closed session pursuant to Texas Open Meetings Act, Texas Government Code Chapter 551. The board will adjourn to closed section pursuant to sections 551.071 to 551.074. Okay, at this time, the board is back in the open session. We are ready for reports and presentations. 6.01, Education Resource Group, ERG update. Good evening.
Good evening. Good to see you all again. It's my annual trip up here to HEB, and as usual, it's an exciting one because once again, it's good news to deliver. It's always easier to go places when it's good news. So, I'm not going to, we have some review slides in there regarding our methodology, but I know you're all familiar with it. So I'm not going to belabor that unless you need me to slow down and get into it a little bit further. But as you know, we are a performance management company. The biggest thing that we do is that we are big on looking at measurements. And the first thing you always have to do is identify how well your organization is doing. Now, this is important right now, and Dr. Harrington and I were just talking about changes in accountability that are coming up. And one of the things that ERG does is that we do relative performance. So looking at standard measures and then creating basically our scorecard, which we'll talk about in a second. We then rank the district relative to other districts in the state. And that's how we differ greatly from accountability. Accountability, it's a rating. Well, this past year in 2022, a bunch of school districts rose to A's and B's. In fact, almost 78% of the school districts in Texas are A's and B's. And if that's the case, how do we really know who's doing a great job? When you use relative rankings, it's more like, well, you're ranked. We know the Chiefs right now are #1 in NFL football after competing in the Super Bowl. Ranking is very easy to understand, and so that's why ERG uses that as our methodology, because we are not here to replace accountability. We are here to help you run your organization better, more effectively. So we use rankings to do that. It also helps us determine where improvements are necessary. So areas where you're either stagnant or falling backwards, obviously those become areas of concern. Then we also identify other folks who maybe are doing even a better job than you are, because always looking at who those folks are and modeling after them is easier than trying to reinvent the wheel. So who are those folks? And I know you already have districts that you look at and compare yourselves to, and we'll be looking at those as well. Lastly, are your improvement strategies working? That's why I come back here every year, is to see whether or not what you did in the previous school year had the desired effect of moving Hurst-Euless-Bedford forward. All right. Still, the greatest challenge to performance remains to be seeing yourself as you actually are. It's hard to look in the mirror unless you're HEB. Currently, the A through F accountability system, the scorecard looks like this for Domain 1. Approaches grade level, and well, all three of the STAR measures at 15%, college, career, or military ready at 45%, and graduation rates at 10%. ERG's is slightly different. Ours has not really changed. Notice, really the only change is that we're using the TSI criteria graduates for one of the post-secondary measures. It replaced college-ready graduates. It's essentially the same thing. It's just really the title to it changed. But it's essentially the same thing. We don't use other college, career, or military-ready measures because they're too new and they're too flexible. They change so dramatically that it makes it hard for us to include it in the index, so that way you can steer the ship when all of a sudden limes are being thrown into the mix of apples that you've been using to measure yourself against. All right. The other area that we really differ is in terms of performance. Now, I know with Domain 2, Part 2, there's a relative performance piece, but again, where we use this to target is to identify how much the district is performing above or below expected. Because in achievement-based systems, for example, we have two districts here, one with 25% economically disadvantaged students, one with 85% economically disadvantaged students. And according to achievement, they're both doing the same thing. Pass rates at roughly 53%. However, we know that the district with 85% economically disadvantaged students is far outperforming what the model would predict it to be doing, all right, to the tune of 22.4%, all right? Whereas the one that had 25% economically disadvantaged students is underperforming by almost 5%, all right? So we use both an achievement index, which is the raw numbers, and then this is the performance index that we'll be looking at. So just as a reminder, achievement has a strong bias towards districts and campuses that have a low percentage of economically disadvantaged students. Performance removes the socioeconomic bias, all right, and offers us an opportunity to identify those organizations, people, and programs that are highly effective, all right? And of course, with the adoption of A through F, this basically mirrors our methodology that we've been doing for roughly 20 years. All right, so where is HEB? In regards to the academic performance matrix, so this is achievement and performance in 2022. The district is in that upper right quadrant as usual, very near the top, high end of performance, first quartile achievement as well. Now, in the productivity matrix, this is using 2021 financials because the 2022 financials will not be released until probably April, or at least in the system until April. They usually release that data March, April, so we'll get that in as soon as we can. But still, we did use a predicted number for 2022 based off of the district's history, so we expect you to be number one, still up at the top of that productivity index. Okay, so no matter how you slice and dice it, whether it's straight academics looking at achievement and performance or adding in the efficiency aspect of finance, the district is highly effective. All right. What changed from 2021 to 2022? The red dot is HEB, so you can see that you moved up and to the right slightly, which is always the goal, to move up into that upper right corner. Katy and Conroe were actually slightly above you in terms of performance in 2021, and you can see that they have dropped down. They're still slightly higher than you in terms of achievement, but in regards to relative performance, they moved down. Carroll is still almost in the exact same spot. So those, in regards to that 1-1 box, and those districts that were closest to you, and perhaps maybe who you were using to model yourself, and as I mentioned, you benefit of what we do is identifying models of high performance. Right now, you pass up Conroe and Katy in regards to overall performance. So still good to look at because again, they're high achieving school districts and achieving slightly higher than HEB, but you surpassed them in 2022. Sci-Fair, you'll notice, was kind of on that edge of the 2021 box, or in 2021, edge of your box, and they dropped down also further in regards to performance and achievement. So move down into the left, which is not the direction you want to go. Other districts that made some big jumps, Grapevine, Colleyville made a big jump up in regards to performance. So they went from that second tier box right here, and then jumped up, pretty much straight up, I think by about 15 ranking points. All right. Richardson stayed about the same. Mansfield moved up a little bit. Keller moved up a little bit. Northwest moved backwards, and Birdville moved down as well in regards to performance, almost by 20 points. And Eagle Mountain, Saginaw moved up, but they're still down here in the yellow. Remember that yellow is kind of what we call hiding in plain sight. These are school districts that are high achieving, but are not performing as well as we would predict given the demographics they serve. So they're really leaving a lot of cards on the table given the demographics they serve. All right. Any questions yet? Good. All right. So looking at the performance indexes, you moved up. You moved up by 1% in 2022 in regards to the achievement index. Again, when you're at the top, that's kind of a hard thing to do. In regards to the performance index, you moved up 3%. When you're at the very top, that's even harder to do because you're at the 97.9th percentile. The school districts that are really in terms of outperforming on the performance index are districts that have even more economically disadvantaged students than Hurst-Euless-Bedford, and they mostly reside in the valley, just so you know, okay? In regards to the financial index, this is again a predicted number, so that's why I put it in red. It does not mean it's going backwards, it's just that it's predicted. But we are predicting that for 2022, the districts stay right there at the very top in regards to the financial efficiency index. All right? So when we delve into the indexes and the components that make up the indexes, the top half of this happens to be the achievement index. So you can see that in regards to raw achievement, the district went up in all three STAR criteria pieces. So the value went from the 77th percentile to the 85th. In regards to approaches, 51st to 62nd, almost 63rd percentile in meets. So that's a pretty substantial jump there, over 10%. And masters almost by 10% from the 25th percentile to the 35th, almost the 35th, 34.6. Areas, graduation rates stayed almost the same in regards to your ranking. The two areas that we saw go down, one was the TSI criteria graduates, which again is what replaced college ready, and ACTs went down slightly, so 78.2, or the 23rd percentile down to the 22.8. So again, very, very slight change, or I'm sorry, from the 78th percentile down to the 68th. So slight change there. All right. Performance, once we adjust for demographics, you'll notice that the two changes in regards to the TSI and the ACT, you're only 4 points below where we would expect in regards to the TSI criteria. And you're still, when we look at ACT, 1.7 points above what we would expect. Now notice that you were 1.4 above in 2021, so it shows that you actually improved. However, what that means is other folks improved faster than the district in regards to the ACT scores. All right? So, but still, overall, a great report card, because a lot of the other measurements were all positive and moved in the right direction. Okay? So once we start looking at different accountability measures that come up over the next year, again, this is the kind of stuff that we'll be tracking. How is the district performing relative to everybody else? So if STAR scores in general go down, did your scores go down less than other school districts went down? Faster than other school districts went down? We expect that because there's going to be a new level of difficulty that everybody's going to be trying to overcome in the new accountability system. All right. Questions? All right, let's take a look at the campuses. So how we evaluate campuses is very similar to how we look at the school district. High schools, it's actually identical. Elementary and middle schools, just like in accountability, we have to rely on the 3 STAR performance measures because that's all we have. This is outstanding. So for the first time in a long time, there was another time a while back that the district had all of its campuses in the green box, but it's been a little while. But once again, all of your campuses are solidly in the green boxes, all right? The biggest thing for me is not even BLE moving, right where it's at, because it's still right there. But the upward movement of all of the school districts, the relative performance piece, that's, for the elementary schools, that's awesome. They went way up. So your biggest changes, and we'll look at the amount of change in regards to performance. The campus that made the biggest upward movement was Spring Garden. All right, Spring Garden made a huge jump. The other top movers, so I kind of identified the top 5. Bedford Heights, Bell Manor, Midway Park, and North Euless were the 5 elementary campuses, and including Spring Garden, that made the biggest jumps. Okay? All right, so let's quantify that. So this is just a comparison in regards to 21 and 22, their achievement index percentile, and then the 1-year change, and then the performance index and the 1-year change. So again, as I've mentioned, the biggest change was Spring Garden. In regards to achievement, they went from 66th percentile up to the 81st, almost 82nd percentile, which was a 15.4. That's achievement, folks. That's STAR, right? Big jump. 2021, in regards to performance, they were in just shy of the 30th percentile, jumped up to the 73rd percentile. That's a 43 percentile jump, right? And by the way, when we look at elementary schools, this is relative to all elementary schools in the state. School districts, we lump y'all with the group of 200 largest school districts in the state. But when we look at campuses, this is relative to all elementary campuses. So they jumped over a bunch, 43% of them, okay? And then again, as you can see, positive big jumps at Bedford Heights, especially in regards to performance, Bell Manor in both achievement and performance. Then the next biggest movers were Midway Park. Again, big jump, 20% in achievement and 28% in regards to performance. Moved up into the 73rd percentile for achievement and to the 92nd for performance. And North Euless, almost 12% jump in regards to achievement and a 30% jump in performance. I would love to take this anywhere and show this to anybody. This is something to really be proud of. We don't see this often, all right? We study this all the time. All right, looking at your middle schools, your junior highs, again, they moved up and to the right. You can't ask for much more than that. That's a great story to tell again. Lots of positive movement, again, relative to all of the elementary school or middle schools and junior highs that are out there. Big jumps. Biggest jump was with Hurst Junior High, an almost 4.6% jump in achievement and a 14% jump in regards to performance. All right. High schools, Keys made a big move. Keys made a really big move. Went straight up in regards to performance. That is huge. And again, the performance numbers for both Bell and Trinity went up as well. All right. So relative to all high schools out there, they jumped almost 11% in regards to the achievement index and 51% in regards to the performance index. That is fabulous. So they're now solidly in the second quartile at 61.5% in regards to their performance. All right, from 10.5, kudos. That's huge. All right, that's really all I have for you guys until we release finance. So, you know, we tell everybody that successful organizations are basically defined by some of these elements. They're defined relative to their performance to the peers. We just looked at that. Y'all are knocking it out of the park there. Having worked with your staff, and when I talked to the commissioner, which, by the way, I was visiting with him for a couple weeks ago, he was like, HEB's back at the top, aren't they? And he knows. I was like, yeah, they're solidly up there. And he knows that y'all are constantly innovating and working to identify those improvements. Sign that y'all do the third piece, systematically measuring your performance. We know you're doing that. I come back here every year to report on it. I'm happy to do so, make the trip from the Woodlands. You guys are never confusing motion with accomplishment. It's always goal-oriented. What you're doing is meant to achieve something, and that means something. And you focus, even though y'all are one of the most efficient school districts in the state, in fact, you are in our productivity index, you're also highly effective. And that is demonstrated by your move up in regards to the academic matrix and how y'all are moving there. So happy to always report, because getting to the top is hard, but y'all stay there year after year. So thanks for having me back and allowing me to share the message with you guys.
Thank you so much. Any questions?
Joe, I just can't see a report like this and think how awesome it is, but at least giving you a few seconds to say, so what did Spring Garden do? And you may not be able to know the answer to that, but I mean, this is incredible.
You know, I think a lot of this was due to, we kept doing what we know works, and as we came out of the pandemic and got class back to normal and did the things that we know how to do, and that's the piece about this, it's relative performance that we're looking at, and we were able to get our performance back faster than other districts could, because we relied on the processes that we had in place, and we knew what to do because we've done it for so long. Now, we had to tweak processes last year, especially, you know, to take care of kids. So we had to kind of look at things a little differently, but when it all came down, we went back to what we know how to do. I really think, now, Darla, you may have something special at Spring Garden. A lot of hard work.
It's our people. The people make the
People
difference.
make the difference.
Absolutely.
Well, and the innovation, you know, the work we've been doing with TK also is, we're not just sitting back and saying, look how good we are, we want to get better.
So in contrast to though, like at Oakwood Terrace and Shady Brook, how can we help them, or what are we doing to help them to get their number back up?
Well, I think you have to look at also relative to, yeah, they dipped a little bit, but, you know, they didn't do badly. Shady Brook was an A, rated. Oakwood was
And Oakwood was like an 89,
so,
rounded up.
They did very well, but yes, looking at the chart, you're automatically goes to who scored there in the red. But they're aware, there was, you know, some circumstances that extenuating that affected, a couple of grade levels. With teaching assignments and whatnot, teacher being out, things like that. Not that that's an excuse at all, but you have to look at all the factors that.
Are those two of our campuses that have the highest mobility rate also? Does that factor in?
It could, they're not the very highest, but they are working hard.
I know they are.
The work they're doing this year. In the LTEP practices, we brought Oakwood Terrace on this year. Shady Brook is in their second year, and just, seeing the work that they're doing and the very focused, planning PLCs and the observation and coaching and feedback,
It's all good.
And if I can interject very briefly, just remember that this color coding that's here, the dark red, is just because it's formatted to match the data that I have on this spreadsheet. So it's the lowest performer on HEB, but it really stayed relatively steady compared to other campuses out there. Yeah. So it's a dark red, but that's just because it's the group that it's presented within context too. If we were to look outside of HEB, that slight drop, it would not even register for a lot of school districts. So I just, you know, I know it came out dark red because of the formatting, but overall, you know, when I look at a lot of other districts and their campuses out there, it would not be something that would raise alarm bells for me.
Now, our lowest performing campus may be many districts' highest performing.
Exactly.
Let's hear for Keys.
Yeah.
Listen, all of this makes us very, very proud. We know our people are working hard and doing all the right things for our kids, and it shows.
Absolutely.
Any other questions? All right, I know that, you know, I've been on the board for 10 years now, and I always look forward to this report because it's always good. But also, you know, when you come onto this board and you start learning more and more about, you know, continuous improvement, working with the ERG and getting this data makes perfect sense because they go so well together, because you're able to see the real effectiveness of the work that you're doing. And that's what you're trying to do, is you're trying to bring every kid, no matter where they start, up a year or more every year. And, you know, and this is one of the ways that we can see that we're actually doing that. So thank you so
Absolutely.
much for being here today.
Thank you for having me.
All right, instructional support for elementary math. Dr. Norgard.
And friends.
And
We have a whole team
Math
approach
cohort.
for you this evening. I'm going to start us off, but then I will be turning it over. We have both of our math coordinators, Gary Adcox and Krista Manning, and actually their facilitators each came with them, Michelle Lawhorn and Amanda Hartso. And I love the placement of this report being just after ERG, because I look at the questions you're asking. What can we do? Who needs more support? Which is really the same kind of question that prompted us bringing this report. After the math DBA, we were asked, well, what do we do for our campuses that are in need of support? So that's what we're here to talk about with you this evening, is how do we provide instructional support across all of our math programs? So this would, of course, be connected to our strategic plan in Goal 3, where we talk about the training and resources for everyone to effectively do their job. And we're going to talk about the campus and classroom support and the process that our content coordinators, along with their facilitators, go through to support the campuses. And while this is math, because that's where the request was originally given, the processes that these ladies will outline for you would be echoed had I brought science here tonight or social studies or ELA, because it's the process of the thinking and identifying and then what happens next. So I'm going to give each of them an opportunity to share that process with you. Kristen Manning is going to speak first about the factors that coordinators consider when they're thinking about, what do I need? Okay, I've seen that red box. What does that mean? What's happening at that campus? And then Gary Adcox will share, okay, now I've considered these things, I've made a plan. What does it look like when the plan rolls out? How do we deliver that plan? So with all of that, I am going to turn it over to Kristen.
Thank you. Thank you for having us. I thought the very same thing, though.
Yeah.
As I was listening to that last report, I was going, wait, that's what I'm fixing to say. I mean, it really was, that when you develop these plans, it was so, they go,
Because all the animations disappeared.
oh, good.
It's all already there. You don't have to
No animations. Great job. Okay. So thank you for having us here. Gary and I, as math coordinators, we really, when we're going to go out and develop a plan, we have to gather information. And so that's what we do a lot through talking to people and observing teachers and doing that. And so there's three broad areas that we look at to find that information. And the first is the individual teacher considerations. And specifically, what math knowledge do those teachers bring to us? And that comes in a wide variety. What is their depth of knowledge? Do they know math through the middle school years? And we will get first-year teachers to teachers with math experience in a different grade, to teachers with math experience in the grade we're looking at, to teachers with experience but not in math, and all different kinds of certification levels. So we've got to continue just to gather information so we know what to go do. And then, just as important, what is their expertise in pedagogy or the practice of teaching? Do they have the best practices that they need in the classroom? And those two things go hand in hand. We've got to see where their levels are, and both of those take time yet to develop. And so we look at that, and we need time. But I know for all four of us, Amanda, Michelle, Gary, and myself, it is our calling, it is our passion, it is our responsibility to grow and develop teachers, and we love doing this. So that's why we go seek the information so that we can help those teachers best. We've also got to look at the individual teacher. Are there any extenuating circumstances when we're wanting to intervene? We have teachers that have extended leaves for reasons. We have teachers that maybe in some of the grades, they might have an inclusion class. That would be a reason why their score's there, or all ADVAC, something along those different lines. Maybe they teach more than one subject. We've just got to look at the specifics for that teacher and what they teach. And then finally, and just as important, is where do they stand with their classroom management? Because that is huge in teaching in the classroom, and they may need growth in that area, and we have to put that in our plan. So we look at that. And just kind of as facts, because we mathematicians love that. And I'm using sixth grade because that's what I know. But the turnover rate in grades 3 through 6 in mathematics teachers in the last 5 years has been greater than any time in my 37 years that I've been dealing with teaching. And while COVID has been a little piece of that, it is greater for many reasons, and I don't know. We're losing a lot of people from the profession. The district has had growth, while maybe not in this past year as much, but we've grown and added positions, and then we move people up to fill other positions, and you have retirements and you have all of those different reasons, but the turnover's been amazing. And to put it in perspective, of our 21 campuses at the end of this year, there will be 5 sixth grade math teachers that are the same as when I started as facilitator coordinator 6 years ago. And within those 15, 16 campuses, there might have been turnover several times. So it is a new workforce that we are training constantly in there, and it seems greater in the grades 3 through 6. So that's kind of puts a little bit in perspective with our individual teachers. And then the second broad category, we've got to look at the campus, and the different considerations for that campus. And first, does that teacher, especially in elementary, do they have a planning partner? Are there 2 math teachers on the campus? Do they have instructional specialists that, how much availability? Are they full-time or part-time? And then, of course, the teacher instructional coaches, do they have any kind of experience in math? And so we look at the support that the teachers have on the campus when we look at what then do we need to provide, because there may be more or less support there. And then the principal, what does the principal want us to do? I mean, with that obviously becomes first into what we do, because we've got to be lined up with their vision. And then we look at the special populations for that campus, and we got to do what, every campus is different, and so we've got to make sure we're meeting the needs for that. And sometimes the master schedule will play into that, because they are a little different on all of the campuses, and so we look at that. And then different student cohorts, we'll look at the history of that to kind of gather, is there a trend, a pattern that has developed with that student cohort? And then the final thing we look at is the curriculum considerations. And, first, do we need to do any additional training for the teachers on the resources? If they're a new teacher, that's a lot of stuff coming to you. And I know we have new teacher training. They're just trying to survive at that point. So we go out and do a lot of that kind of support and see if that's it. Do they know what we have, and do they know how to use it? Where is it? We'll train in all of that. Can we differentiate any of the materials for them? Maybe they've got a special group of students that need something that we can do with what we have, and so we'll look at what that is. Assessment and data go hand in hand with curriculum now. They are not 2 separate fields. And we work a lot, and our facilitators go out, and we as coordinators and do a lot of training on gathering their data. Do they know how to read it? Do they know how to understand it? And then from that, do they know how to develop a plan? And so we've got to consider those 3 main areas. And now Gary's going to kind of share with you what are some of the things then we've done after we find out where those areas are.
Once Kristen and I have gathered the information, we provide support to teachers at the district, campus, and individual level. At the district level, we of course have our professional development days, and we try to make sure that these include multiple sessions designed to increase our teacher proficiency and to address areas in need of additional support. We also implemented our instructional planning sessions this year after school, and these are targeted to our specific grade levels, and they emphasize best practices that we have embedded within the curriculum. Approximately once a month, our instructional specialists and our teacher instructional coaches meet with me for intensive training on district initiatives and areas in need of support, and we have Kristen join us for support for our 6th grade math teachers as needed. Because that's a little bit of a different thing, because 6th grade has a different coordinator but they're in the elementary school. Kristen has also set up 6th grade teacher cohorts to provide additional training and support for the 6th grade math teachers. At the campus level, as Kristen said, this is our joy and our delight. At the campus level, we get to go out and actually work with the teachers right where they are and provide them with the support they need. We, along with both of our facilitators, model lessons. We co-teach lessons. We're in the classrooms with the teachers. And to provide that just-in-time training as we're teaching, as we're modeling, to help them meet specific needs, not just for them, but for their classroom, looking at what those students need in that particular classroom. We also, with our facilitators, go out and observe teachers, not evaluating them, but looking for how we can provide support and what specific needs they have and their students have. We give them feedback, meet with them afterwards to help them increase their student success. We analyze data with our teachers. We go meet with them during their planning times and after school. We look at campus and grade level data, individual teacher data, and then we use this information to help them develop a plan for instruction and remediation. We also provide additional resources if a campus needs those to meet specific needs for their teachers. We, along with our facilitators, prepare and deliver grade level and sometimes even individual professional development at a campus to meet the need for that specific campus when we're requested by principals or by grade level teams. And we are always looking at how every campus has an area where they want to grow and how we can meet those needs and those challenges. In addition, we adjust our curriculum when our data analysis, our observations show that it needs it. We look at specifically how it's working across the district, and is this something where we need to adjust the whole curriculum, or do we need to just go work with a specific area of need? We purchase resources based on our data analysis and based on feedback from teachers and from our instructional specialists and instructional coaches so that we can better support our student learning. And we also facilitate cross-campus observations. If we have a teacher that is the only third grade math teacher on her campus, we pair her up with a teacher who's having a lot of success and let them go observe so they can get additional ideas for how they can meet the needs of their students.
So this is the sandwich portion. I started us off and coming back around. I hope what you've heard throughout, what both of these ladies have shared with you is our CI. This is so PDSA. We've made a plan with our curriculum. Our teachers delivered it. We studied it through a DBA, and now these are our plans for action and going right back through it. So as I said, this is really the process that any coordinators would go through because it's our process as a district. It's our CI process. So are there any particular questions you have from what was shared this evening?
I have several.
Okay.
And I asked for this because I think the board needed to see the people where the rubber meets the road. We hear from you all the time, Holly, and it's great, and we hear the flowery and all the stuff, but we don't actually know how much work it takes to get that. And now you've heard a little bit of what they do and the campuses they go to. I have a couple of questions. You know, we have a list of the elementaries, and I won't mention them, that were low performing. Do you start with them, or are you just broad-based and you go to all the schools, or do you have a special strategies you use with the ones that I have marked in the yellow? I won't mention them, but they're math. Kristen, either one of y'all can answer it. It doesn't make any difference.
At the elementary level, because I have 6 of the grades there, I do look at the data and I do plan specifically to address the needs of our campuses that maybe have some of the biggest challenges. And particularly after the DBA, I'll look at the campuses maybe that struggle the most with that DBA, and I go out to them. But I also make sure that I am seeing all of our campuses. I keep track on my desk that I'm getting to every campus, but I do specifically target ones as I see needs arising and try to get to that just in time and address that while it's a fresh thing that we can address quickly.
And how in the world do you handle mobility? I know a couple of our schools, you know, some of classes have complete new classes at the end of the year than they had at the beginning of the year. I mean, how do you face that on a daily basis?
So we can't manage it because it's going to happen, but it's in the resources that we've provided. I do believe, I'm just going to speak since we completely have to go back and forth, but classroom management that Kristen touched on as well, that does impact because when the dynamic is changing, and if you don't have that strong classroom management, it doesn't matter how strong the math content knowledge or the pedagogy is if I don't have control to deliver that great lesson.
But you know, Holly, we look at the score sometimes, and now we know that in third grade there's a huge change in teachers. We look at it like everyone's been teaching for 10 years. And now we can look at the third grade and say, well, they're doing really great because these are all new teachers. We don't know that. And that's why I wanted the coordinators to come, because y'all are the ones that do the work and don't get enough credit, by the way. Do principals help or hurt you? And how often do y'all get out to the schools?
All the time, yeah. You keep I know you keep a tally.
Yes, I have a tally because one of my goals for my evaluation is that I will this year be in the classroom of 165 teachers observing them, and I'm up to 134 as of today.
See, we don't know that. I mean, that's unbelievable.
It's not just us, it's they are going constantly. I mean, on our schedule, I don't know how many visits are on our schedule this week. Bunch.
Okay, my last question, and Holly, you can close your ears. How can we help you as a school board? This wasn't an I got you. I just wanted the board to hear how much work, having been a principal, I know how much work it takes to get there. I'm not sure they know all the work. And so I wanted y'all who do the work to come explain how many schools you go to and what it takes to get those scores that we just got great grades on.
It takes manpower, but it takes quality, okay, people working, and you can have too many administrators, you really can. But if you don't have a big enough team, I was fortunate to get an ESSER position. We've brought an intensified algebra program on, and she's helping roll that out. She's doing so much more than that. She's fabulous. Janetta Garcia, who's not here as well, and with Michelle, just what an extra person, does.
So with the ESSER
in
funds
that.
going away, we need to look at
It's that type of thing.
all the
to
subject
not-
areas.
Yeah,
Right,
to look
correct.
at something like that.
Thank you for saying that. You're one of the few that would do that. So thank you. If we don't know, if we can't correct it. I mean, we're out in the public and they ask us questions and they say, what are you doing? Well, now, and I want special ed to do that too, we need to be educated as school board members so we give better answers to our community. So thank you so much for coming.
Were there any other questions?
Yeah, any other questions from the board?
And I'll just echo, because I do know, Mr. Cargo, when you first asked for this report, you said you hear from me all the time. That is, though, part of what I'm trying to do for knowing how hard that they work so that they go home on Monday night, and that's why I'm bringing you the data. But I appreciate this opportunity
Right.
to recognize these ladies and all the work. And like I said, had it been any of my department, you'd hear those same processes. But, and y'all know, because I was in Kristen's shoes just 6 years ago, so.
Yeah, and I mean, what really stood out to me in the presentation was how much turnover there is. And we all know that there's a lot of turnover right now, and it's gotten especially bad in the last 3 or 4 years. But, there's always a story that everyone tells each other in my industry, and I'm sure they tell it in other industries, is, the owners are afraid to spend money on training because what if the guys just get up and leave and find a new job because they have all this training? And the answer is, well, what do you do if you don't train them and they stay? So, I know it can be frustrating to constantly be starting over and over and over again, but we appreciate all the hard work and all the challenge it takes to ramp these new teachers up, and even experienced teachers who are coming from other places and don't understand exactly the systems that we follow to get things done. So thank you.
Thank you for the
Thank you, Holly.
opportunity to highlight this team. I think I'm next. Am I also next? And now some
right.
more from me.
Yes, measures of academic progress map.
Okay, so we have map growth. Another reason, actually, why I love coming behind the ERG report, you'll see some similarities here in just a moment. I do want to point out this is related to our strategic plan of the meeting or exceeding expected progress. Now, usually with DBAs, I'm talking about achievement on STAR, and ERG highlighting that difference between achievement versus when you actually rank. Because we need to remember when we're looking at map data, this is norm reference, not criterion reference. So on a STAR or a DBA, it is theoretically possible for every single student to score a 0 and for every single student to score 100%. But map is norm referenced where we're placing them in a continuum compared to each other because we're looking at instructional level. Where is each child fall? If I've got a classroom full, who's high flying and going on versus who is not flying as fast as the rest of the class. So it helps teachers for that norm reference, not the criterion. So not everybody's going to be 100 here because they can't be in this model.
So again, I think we've talked about this before. This isn't just the bell curve of just HEB students. This is students from...
That is correct, yes. So the norm reference, we are marked against norms. Now, the teachers get data that does show them within their class, within that grade level on their campus, within their entire campus. So that's the teacher level data to work with. But in general, so remember with these 5 bands, you would expect 20% of students to fall in each of them. Because again, we're putting all of the students along this continuum. So the more blue and green and yellow we have, the better, and the smaller the orange and red. Because A typical average campus would have equal amounts of all 5 colors. So that's really what we're looking for, is let's see more blue, green, and yellow than we see orange and red. So this is our 3rd grade, middle of year performance. We do have some trend data because they took MAP at the beginning of the year. And again, norm reference, you'll see that those bars stay fairly close. There's a little bit of shift from time to time, but again, someone's always going to be at the lower end and the higher end. But what we also look at is meeting or exceeding growth projection. Now remember, bell curve, 50th percentile is exactly what you'd expect. And that is so hard for us when we're used to talking about 90% approaches and 60% meets. 50th percentile is what you would expect. Okay, so that's just that different thinking in the norm reference. So 54% of our 3rd graders met or exceeded their growth projection. I'm sorry, this is all in reading. It's on the top, but I don't believe I stated that. For 4th grade, again, we see quite a bit more blue and green than would be present in just a typical normal curve. Here's how they have done compared to beginning of year. So we see a little movement in those bars. Again, the teachers have that level of data, which students might have moved from yellow to green or vice versa, because sometimes there'll be jumps in both directions. 44% of our 4th graders met or exceeded their growth projection, so below that 50th percentile we'd be looking for. So again, that's where they're going to come in and look. But again, there's going to be more movement from middle of year to end of year. And when we've looked, MAP is a fairly new assessment for us, but when we looked at our history last year, we saw more growth between middle and end of year, kind of getting ramped up. So we'll be watching that trend this year as well.
All right, Holly, so when you're
Yes.
when you're looking at the chart there, so basically that when you come up and say the 44%, that doesn't correspond directly to that chart.
Okay,
'Cause you'd
let
have
me-
to know how many of that percentage is 50% and how many
Okay,
is
so
below
if
50%.
all the blue and green had looked exactly the same at beginning and middle of the year, we'd probably be right at 50th percentile of growth.
Okay.
Because things were just staying right steady. We had the same number of blues at beginning and middle of year, same number of greens. And what you can see here is we actually we've got more orange and red right now at mid-year than we did at beginning of year. So we have some students that didn't move as expected. I have done a deeper dive into this data. Dr. Allen and I sat down and looked at some of the data together. And you may recall I pointed out when we had our beginning of year map that I talked about in the normal curve. There is a summer slide built in. If you look at the norm averages, there is an expectation that students start the new year further behind than they left the previous year on the national norms, and we did not slide as much as the national norms. So we kind of came in a little strong at beginning of year compared to these national norms. So it's like right now we're kind of falling more in sync, although we're still much better. That's still more blue, green, and yellow than on a national norm. So that is why this was less than 50th percentile. Does that make sense? I have more orange and red at mid-year than I did at beginning of year. So I have more students that have fallen into the low average and low. If I was growing at 50th percentile, it would be that nice, steady, consistent status quo. I'd have the same amount of red, the same amount of orange, the same amount of
I
yellow.
guess I just don't understand where the growth projection comes from.
Okay, when I very first brought MAP, I had a whole bunch of slides of some of the research. The score that they get it's a RIT, it's a Roche unit. It's not really RIT standing for anything, it's a Roche unit, that should be a consistent move from kindergarten through 12th grade. And so based on their data, they get that RIT score, and on these norms, it should be, if I had 150 at mid-year, you'd be expected to be at 160 at mid-year. But the amount of growth that you would see has also been normed. What do I expect? I expect this much growth from beginning to middle of year for a 4th grader. I expect this much growth from beginning and middle of year. And so then it sees how many of the students met that growth. Because I have to keep, if I'm blue, I don't get to stay blue. I have to keep growing to stay blue. And if I'm yellow, because again, it's not criterion referenced. It's not I crossed the blue line and so now I'm blue forever. I have to keep growing to stay blue. I have to keep growing to stay green. But we have some students here, that maybe were yellow or green, well, the blue. The blue is shorter. Did you see that for mid-year? We have some students that didn't grow enough. They're high-achieving students, but they weren't showing up as high at middle of year. They're probably high average, but we would want our high students to still be high students. We want them to be high, 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 but they have to grow to stay high. Does that make sense?
I think I'm asking this, gonna ask the same question that Matt is, just maybe from a different perspective. You're hitting a moving target that never stops. It's continuing to move
Agreed.
forward.
Yes,
when we get
because
a-
we should always grow.
Right, so when we get a middle of the year snapshot, it's not the same as where they were to where they are. It's where they are in relation to where the target should be moving.
Did they grow as much as they needed to grow to stay on target?
So the higher you start, the harder it's gonna be to have good numbers in the met your growth projection.
Not necessarily the harder, but there is a different, where you landed on the first test is going to determine how you need to grow to stay blue or green.
So Holly, let me ask this a different question. It seems, and this is where I need some clarification, that they didn't do as well in mid-year in every category except for third grade math, where it looks like the blue and green went much bigger mid-year. Is that a correct assessment?
Let me look at all the slides,
I'm sorry,
because I've looked at a lot
Yeah,
of
I know.
data. I
No,
think that is correct. Anything where our growth was below the 50th percentile means somewhere we didn't get all the kids they need to be. But like with ERG, it's all relative and where we are. I did not panic at a single one of these when I looked at the grade level. So let me start with that statement. I am not panicked about any of these. 50th percentile is where we expect to be. The ones that aren't, but we might have been at beginning of year, and again, like all those considerations that our math coordinators just gave you, what's happening in these students' classroom at this time, what is yet still to come for them in their intervention and support.
Yeah, I mean, the struggle I had was when you look at the charts, things look like they're pretty good. And then you get down to the next one and you see only 40% of our fourth graders met or exceeded their growth projections. That looks really bad. So it's hard in my mind to say, okay, why do these numbers look so good, but that number does not look good?
I do think a lot, and as Dr. Allen and I did a deeper dive, because we came back stronger than the norms expect coming from summer. So our BOY were really strong out of the gate.
Like I said, we started higher, so it was harder to say higher.
Because we still needed to grow from there. But we all grow at different patterns, and this is to a norm. So just because we started high in summer doesn't mean we were slacking, but that may be our push for growth. Maybe we've done a really good job pushing through the summer. Then when we come back, where there's some intensity that builds in the spring. The longer we have mapped, the more we'll be able to identify those trends, because we'll look at our trends, not just national trends. At fifth grade reading, here's the current year performance and the comparison to where this group of students was at beginning of year to middle of year. So really right at that target point, 49th percentile. So our sixth grade, here's the current year performance, only testing in English, just like all of our other tests. Here is the beginning of year and middle of year. And you see 46% met or exceeded growth. So again, just that visual, if I go back, you see I've got more yellow now. Well, that's average performance, so it doesn't mean my students are in trouble. It just means more of them were in high average, so I wanted them to stay high average so that I could have hit that 50th percentile instead of 46. So now we're into math instead of reading. So here is our third grade, current middle of year performance. Here is their beginning of year to middle of year. So here we see 57% of growth. So can you see, if I go back to that, there's less orange and red. It's just a very different kind of test and report to look at than what I usually bring you. So 57% of our third graders were meeting or exceeding their growth projection. Our fourth grade math.
So when we're looking at this number, anything 50% above is considered good.
50% is considered good. 45 to 55% is
So because you're
within a
looking
standard
at
deviation. You got to think about bell
as
curve.
long as you're thinking of a bell curve, then 50% is your average.
Is right at the middle.
So So 57 is going to be
Because
a
we
step
would
above.
love to say, I don't want this to get confused with our students aren't, that 60% of our students did not grow. This is based on where they were and where we think they should be. They didn't meet that target. It doesn't mean they won't hit an end-of-year target. It means with this many weeks of instruction, because that is what MAP takes. It takes how many weeks of instruction lapse between this administration and this. This is what we would typically expect. And then here's our 5th grade math, where they were beginning and middle of year. See, and they're lower, but when I look at this, I see that there were a lot of high students, blue, at beginning of year, and fewer of them. Well, we're still way above all the national norms. Less than 30% of our students are in orange or red, which typically you'd expect 40% of students to be there. So we're in a good place, but we started off even better. So how do we keep on track for that? So how do we have our eyes on all of our students so that they all continue to meet or exceed that growth? And then at 6th grade math, you see the beginning and middle of year, 50th percentile. Met or exceeded growth. Questions?
I already feel like I asked all my questions. So.
It's a big mind shift from what I usually stand up and say.
Yeah, I
Because
mean,
we want it to be 100%. I want every student everywhere, and that's not what this is about.
Yeah, no, I mean, I understand the concept of it, and I like the idea of it, but it's still hard to wrap my mind around it when I'm not thinking about it every day. And I see the report, and I'm like, that doesn't look good, so I don't know.
I think the best term I can give you is that when we talk about MAP, we're talking about instructional level. It's not about did they achieve, because if I have a student that I gave a 4th grade math DBA to and they scored 0, I as a teacher have no idea what do they know. I know a bunch of what they don't know, but I don't know where to pick up and help them start learning because I got nothing. Versus the MAP, it's going to tell me they're at about this point of their 3rd grade year, so pick up from here. Or my my students that made a perfect score on a DBA, well, where do I take them from here? Our GT students, and MAP will push them on up so I can see, well, where do I take them from here? They're already a grade level ahead so that I can grow every student. I don't just want to grow people from red and orange. The blues and the greens and the yellows have to keep growing too, or they won't stay blue and green.
All right, thank you, Dr. Norgard. All right, goals 1 and 3 scorecard update. Mr. Streeter.
This is my favorite report because it's probably the most brief one you'll ever get from us. Just very briefly, as you know, we always like to report on our student attendance. And of course, this is 1.6 increased student attendance. As you know, we've reported all year long, we are still struggling to get our kids to the same level that we're accustomed to. We're not doing badly, but compared to HEB standards, we are below what we have typically done. And I will tell you, as I told you a few weeks ago, we have a team of people working really hard. We have campuses calling kids, we have our truancy officers making home visits, we have Ray helping us with that on his spare time, we have our principals, counselors. So I don't think it's from a lack of effort, it's just it's a new challenge that we're faced with, that we're really working, and we're not alone in this. It's a phenomenon we're seeing across the state. So with that said, that you can see we're at just shy of 94%, 93.99. And so we're about 0.8% down again. And so I don't believe we're going to bottom out like we saw last year because that was when we had that big COVID dip. However, I do hope that we stabilize and start maintaining either a flat rate or going back up. Obviously, there's a lot of ramifications for this, and most importantly, it's having kids in seats and learning, and that's important for our academic performance, not only our ADA. So any questions on this before I hand it over to Cicely?
Conrad, what's driving this? Is it sick kids being out? Is it discretionary absences?
You know, I can have John Hollis run a report for us that might be able to give us a little bit more, like what's the most common absence code? We can do that. Let me do that before I speculate. We still have a lot of kids staying home for illness. We also have a lot of kids who are not always coming to school full day, so they may come or leave before attendance. They may leave partial classes. And so I don't know that I can give you a specific trend, but I will have John Hollis run that for us, and that'll give us at least a direction, and I can find that out for you. That's easy.
Conrad, when he runs that, is it possible to also know the number of, like, are they out for one day at a time? Are they out for multiple days? And is that different than what we've seen in the past?
I will check with him to see if we can get a trend. I think what we're going to find is a combination of both, though, based on the reports that I get on a regular basis. And I'll also look at days to see if Mondays or Fridays.
Yeah.
I'll take a peek at that too, because that might be an interesting, what do we need to do differently if we're seeing 3-day weekends happen a lot with certain students? That would be another area to consider.
Are we seeing the same numbers secondary and elementary, or is one or the other driving this?
We'd have to run it anecdotally. When I've looked, it
Yeah.
has been both.
Yeah,
Like one day you look and you see the high school's down in an odd place, and then one day you look and elementary's down in an odd place.
And even by campus, some days you'll see a campus that's been running, we'll say in the mid-90s normally, and then all of a sudden they'll have a dip by 3 or 4%. And that again is anecdotal, like Dr. Harrington said. I can definitively say that's not a specific campus consistently being an outlier. It is up and down across the district from elementary to secondary. Let me break that down a little bit. Give me a few days. It may not be this Friday's update, but by next Friday update, we'll see if we can't give you a little synopsis to point us in a direction.
And real quick, remember also the yellow line, that's 2021. That
Right.
was the year of asynchronous and kids at home and kids here. Everyone came to school and everyone logged in. That is not a typical attendance line right there. That is very high. Our norm has been around 96-ish, which is, we've always run, that was always the thing. We run about 1.5 to 2 points higher than almost every other district. We've always had really good attendance. But this since that year, as the kids have come back, we are not seeing attendance. We're running the same processes. We're following up with like Conrad said, with our truant process. But what we're seeing is we're just not seeing the kids coming at the rates that they did. And so we're trying to determine is this just a fact of COVID, of being everyone told, do not come to school if you're a little sick? A lot of these drivers before was, you need to come no matter what. And the message now has been, if you're sick, stay home.
Yep.
And so there's also a different message being sent. But we are watching these trends because, like I said, we need these kids in school. We can't teach them when they're not with us.
Yeah, and if you notice clearly the first 6 weeks, we were close to that 96. But this is the biggest dip that we've seen in a little while since last year when we had the big COVID outbreak in that January, February timeframe. So great questions. I will definitely get some answers for you on that.
And we did have some sickness going through at that time. Today, the numbers today were better. Dobie and I were happy based on last week. So we trended up a little again. So we are hoping that it will continue. But it is definitely running at rates we have not seen in HEB.
Yeah. Any other additional questions? Thank you.
And then 3.1 is our staff attendance. And so for this, the third 6 weeks that was completed, we are at 95.16, which is about a 0.6 of a percentage point down from second 6 weeks, and that gives us as an average 96.03. So we are certainly pleased with the attendance, but also knowing that there is a lot of sickness going around right now. That is one of the things that we believe has impacted third 6 weeks. Any questions?
Any questions from the board? All right, 6.05, January random intruder audits. Mr. Phillips.
Good evening, everybody. So we had, going through just our normal monthly updates on the random intruder audits that are being conducted by Texas Security Center and TEA. We had 3 in January. Those 3 schools were Lakewood Elementary and Meadow Creek on January 9th, and then we had Harrison Lane Elementary received an audit on January 12th. Was provided copies, so I've explained to you before, the way the process works is when they arrive on campus, the administration lets me know that they are there. As soon as they go through the 4 processes, which are, could they gain entrance to the campus? Were they properly received when they came into the campus as far as checking IDs? Do they have their door audits? And then are their classroom doors locked? Those are the 4 things that we're looking for. So the only correction that we had was Lakewood Elementary, and they had 1 exterior door. This specific door has been a door that has been worked on several times this year. And again, this is addressed really during the facilities meeting, that this has been one of the doors that will be replaced when we do the door replacement. But even though the lock has been replaced, this is a frame issue with the door. So even though it looks locked, it feels like it's locked, sometimes when it gets pulled, it pops. But I will tell you this, that I have averaged about 10 campuses a week for the last month, just checking and taking pictures for the cameras and the access controls. So I'm doing full walks every time I go to a campus, and I have not found an open door since January, since I started in January trying to take pictures. So the staffs are doing an incredible job. Their audits, like I said, they're required to do weekly audits. I would say 99.9% are doing it twice a day. So the staffs are doing an excellent job with keeping up. What I'm really happy to see is that in the first month that we had a few audits, there was some human error that was still there. We haven't had any human error mistakes in the last 6 audits that we've had. So that is trending in the right direction. I think we're doing good. I think as long as the things that we can eliminate, that we're eliminating, which we're working, and we're on schedule to do that. So quick report, no action items needed, but do you guys have any questions on what's happening at the campuses?
So Dan, I have a few questions.
Yes, sir.
On the background information, it says that we would have an audit of 1 campus in September and 3 campuses in October.
Correct.
So now we've had 3 in January. So what can we expect the rest of the year? Have we been given any indication of months where
We've had 3 more this month already. We're supposed to have at least 1 to 2 more. They said we would have 5 to 4 during February. Dr. Harrington and I get notified usually right at the first of the month, a ballpark figure of how many they're coming to.
So can I make a request?
Yes, sir.
That because it's hard to keep track of these as we get them.
Yeah.
So can we have a updated list?
Absolutely.
To show us which schools have been audited, what the corrective action was, and then we can just add to that list as you come back.
I can email that out tomorrow. I have a running list of what their audit date was, whether there was corrective action needed, and when the corrective action was taken.
The best thing to do might be to give that to Ty, and she can add it to our Google Drive.
Okay.
So it can be updated there. Does that make
Absolutely.
sense?
Whatever's easiest for you. It's either in my brain or on my computer, so or both, hopefully.
All right. Any other questions?
Any other questions? All right.
Thank
you all.
Dan. All right. Any questions on disbursements for the month of January 2023?
I do have a question. And Dobie, you can take it up now or in financial statements, whichever makes more sense.
Okay.
But my question revolves around the disbursements for the 2024 proposed bond capital projects fund. So we had a $115,000 expenditure in January. Can you, two questions. Can you give us an idea of what expenditures we can anticipate monthly going forward until we get to the potential bond? And give us an overview on how those funds are then charged back, if they're charged back and brought under the umbrella of the bond?
Yes, actually, Joe brought this to my attention today, and I actually spoke with Corrigan. I'm assuming that's who the expenditures you're talking about. Pardon me, I will vouch that, yes, there's a lot of sickness going around, and it's found my house multiple times. Excuse me. So, yes, obviously, with us preparing for a possible bond election, there's a lot of things happening with Corrigan and all of those expenditures, preparing looking at all the things, the planning, the meetings they've had. Those are all things that they're charging us for, and that's when I do the financial report, you see that new slide I've slipped in there that's where we're accounting for all of those expenditures separately so that we can keep track of those, so that when, if a bond election is called and it passes, then those expenses can all be charged back to the bond. Now, if it doesn't pass, all those expenses still happen and we still have to pay them, so when the bond passes, they will all be charged back to the bond. So, is that answering your question? I mean, yes, they can, and some of that is really up to the board and how far, when we want them. I don't remember if you remember them talking about it, but early on, they talked about, how much money we could save by moving from May of 2024 to November 2023. Well, in that process also, it'll make a difference of how far we want Corrigan to go before we say, okay, hold right here until we get a bond election passed, because that may hold up when we can, the more we can get them to do up front, then the faster we can put that project out to bid if the bond passes. So if we wait.
What is their direction right now? How far have they been directed to take it?
I think their original deal was with the May 2024 election, or with a June, anticipating a June of 2024, putting it out to bid. When I talked to her today, to Susan today, she was going to take those numbers that they've run out and try to work those back to kind of see where that might land, if that makes sense.
I think it does. I think we might need some more information.
Yes, and she's going to get that. She just couldn't get it done in time today to bring something tonight, but we will get you some additional information.
Yeah, and we can do an update on the process. I remember as they were talking, there are pieces that they can do where they go out and prepare for those next steps, and they have costs associated with them. And it is that question of how far do you want to go? And I think a lot of it for the district becomes how confident are you or not? And I remember Josh talking about points at which we need to stop. Are we going to go to here? Are we going to go to here? And I think between Corrigan and Josh, we can put together a report and get some recommendations from the board as we get to this point. Where is our comfort level in proceeding forward?
Yes, because it's going to be a substantial number when it's all said and done.
Yeah, because we need a pretty fleshed out concept that we can
Yes.
present to the voters.
Yeah.
But we
Now
don't
they
need them
may-
working on window details.
Yeah, they may not actually finish out and complete the plans and drawings and all the architectural things, to that extent until we know for sure that we're moving forward. So it's kind of where we decide we're comfortable.
Well, let's
Dr.
get some
Harris
more
is-
information, and then that'll allow us to give, I think, more clear direction.
Yeah.
That will give us a better idea of what we can anticipate in
And
these
she's
monthly
trying to
charges.
put something together for us or work some numbers.
Because I think as a board, we all understood that there was gonna be an expense, but none of us knew how much it was gonna be
Right.
or where we could say, okay, stop here, because we haven't had that discussion, so that's a good point.
Yeah, and the first thing she said when I asked her today, she said, very fair question. So they're going to work on something, so.
All right. Let's see, we're ready for principals discretionary and extended day academy campus funds.
I'm gonna get that up. Okay, several meetings ago, the board asked that we bring a report to the board on these two funds. The principal discretionary funds are what is the 201 fund, I think is what it was called, but that's the accounting number was 201. But it's the principal discretionary fund and then the extended day academy fund. So I put together this report to show you what our campuses, what those are, and a little bit of definition of how those funds work. The principal's discretionary fund is actually in the accounting world is called a special revenue fund under the local programs section. These funds are restricted to specific purposes. And it is further defined as a campus activity fund, although they call it a principal's activity fund. It's actually defined as a campus activity fund, and we use Fund 461. So I point that out to say that these funds do not recall back into the general fund. So in other words, they're not, even though we have a fiduciary responsibility to account for these and watch over these and do all these are not funds that are part of the general fund, if that makes sense. The principals fund, the revenue typically comes from campus fundraisers. So obviously, the more fundraisers, the more successful the fundraisers, the more money they're going to raise and be able to put into these funds. The expenses vary from campus to campus based on what they want or need. The funds are basically spent at the discretion of the campus principal and their staff with some limitations. We do sometimes raise an eyebrow at something they might come across there, and we'll ask them and ask for more clarification or whatever. Here are the elementary school campus discretionary or principal's discretionary funds. And I wouldn't pay a lot of attention to those last 4 or 5 columns, but look at the first column there, the revenue column. You can see what each campus has raised from September 1st through December 31st. And as you see, some campuses do a lot better than other campuses do. And then here's the same thing for the secondary level, the high schools, junior highs, the CTE Center, same thing. Now, the Extended Day Academy funds, those first 2 bullet points are identical to the previous slide I showed you. They're both identical funds as far as accounting goes. But that third bullet point, if you look at that, unlike the principals fund, the revenue for the EDA funds comes from the profit from the extended day programs on those campuses. And in simple format, that profit is calculated as the revenue minus the expenditures minus their proportional share of the administrative expense to administrate those expenditures, and then the $500,000 that comes back into the, we do pull that back into the general fund, and it's proportionately based off of how much of those funds are generated by those campuses. So as an example, like say Veridian, 11% of the total revenue came from Veridian. Well, then Veridian gets charged 11% of the administrative percent, and then 11% of that $500,000 comes out of Veridian funds. That's basically how that works. And then these expenses are typically limited to tutoring and other at-risk needs of the campus. Some other things to consider with the EDA funds are obviously the EDA participation at each campus varies. Some have a lot of participation, some have very little or maybe none. So that's going to obviously impact the revenues coming into those funds. However, you need to keep in mind too that the lower EDA the campuses that have a lower participation rate will also have access to greater Title I funds and other supplemental funds, maybe some ESSER funds. And obviously all campuses have some access to PTA donations and Education Foundation type donations and stuff. But the last bullet point is probably the most important, is at the end of the day, the campuses with the lower EDA funds available to them, if they have a need, an at-risk need, then we're going to do our best to make sure that need is met. And then these are your EDA campus funds. Again, I would just pay attention to that first revenue column. And you can see the campuses that generate a lot of EDA, Veridian, Meadow Creek, Bedford Heights. They generate a lot of EDA funds because they have a very high participation rate in that program. But as I said, these are your Title I fund campuses, and as you will note, that third column is the amount of Title I funds that gets assigned to those campuses. Veridian, Meadow Creek, those campuses I just mentioned on the previous slide, they're not even on here because they don't get any Title I funds at all. So it kind of balances out at the end of the day, and then what doesn't balance out, we help balance it out. It's just a good way to look at that. Does that, all that make sense, or is that kind of what y'all were looking for?
Yeah, I have several questions,
So,
though.
so do I. You go first.
Go ahead, I got several.
I have two questions. Number one, Dobie, you said occasionally you raise an eyebrow as you evaluate this. Walk me through that process. I mean, do you see something that occasionally is out of balance? I'm going back to principal discretionary funds. And then what does that procedure look like? Do you guys step in and say, hey, you're...
The accounting department, anytime, any kind of, it doesn't matter if it's with the principal fund or any kind of purchase comes through the accounts payable department and it looks a little odd, or we have a question about it, then we question it. We pick up the phone and call the campuses. And I'll give one example that Darla and I talked about the other day was what do you call that, where they're trying to get,
Was a program, incentive program.
yes.
For students, like coming tutoring, showing their work. It was an academic incentive. The principal needs some discretionary funds for, student prizes.
Right.
Out of discretionary fund. So we had a conversation about that.
Yeah, so we looked at it, what they were wanting to purchase tennis shoes for kiddos and stuff. And, our accounting department saw that and just thought that was kind of an odd
Okay.
purchase. But when we got the explanation and what the program was and how they were doing it for an attendance incentive, then we just documented that in our files so that if our auditors pull those files, then we can explain this is what we did with those funds, and it makes perfect sense.
My second question is, and I just want to hear it from your perspective or from the staff's perspective, is there any concern, or talk me through why someone like West Hurst may only have 1,000 or 1,500 in expenses and Veridian has 10,000 plus at this same snapshot?
Are we're talking back on the
Back to
principal's
still
discretionary funds? As I said, they are in charge of what they spend and how they spend and how quickly they spend it. And they may be saving up. A lot of times they'll save up for a purchase of some magnitude or something out of this fund. So sometimes they're stockpiling their money, saving up for a big purchase.
I was going to say, that's the thing about the discretionary fund is I also may have just bought something.
Right,
So
gotcha.
I have no money, but I bought something I was saving up for maybe last year, maybe I haven't done fundraising yet. But this is a difficult one to understand it as a snapshot in time.
Right.
Yeah.
So just a clarification, this isn't a full school year, there's only a half, so
This is from
Veridian could be
September to
having
December.
a fundraiser that makes up the fact that they're 10 grand in arrearages at the moment, right?
Right.
Okay.
Yeah, and there is, you probably noticed there's a couple of funds on there that have a negative balance there.
Yeah.
There's their ending cash balance, Meadow Creek. Because that stuck out to me too when I got this report. And like I say, it is a snapshot in time, but what the majority or maybe all of that is, they actually were going on a field trip to the Capitol in Austin. So they purchased all the tickets and stuff to do that field trip out of this fund, and their PTA is reimbursing them for the purchase, and that will be offset that and put it back in there. Other things that can happen with these funds all throughout the year, and we are constantly working, the accounting office is constantly working with the campuses, is that they may charge something to the principal's fund that really should have been charged to the EDA fund. So we'll have to correct that and move those expenditures, and that could count, could be some of that.
Had a beginning cash of 15,000, so they're really not in arrears.
Right, no, it's mainly focused on like Veridian.
Oh, I'm talking about Veridian, it has the next one to the right.
yes, you're right, very good point.
So, any other questions?
Yes, I have a few questions. Evidently, the snapshot that I got about a month ago is completely different than this I'm looking at. I will say that very few, I'd say none, of the principals will talk to you, but all the secretaries and teachers will. Having had discretionary money, I will tell you what I did with my discretionary money. several things, not everything. Not only lunches for teachers, I did the Teacher of the Year awards. I brought the drill team a complete uniform, every kid. I had an affirmative action program that Dr. B agreed with, that if we had any minorities over the number I was allowed as cheerleaders or drill team, they would make it, and I paid every part of their uniform and dues for the year, including band. We bought blankets for kids that were in hospitals. Any kid in the hospital, we had a Trinity blanket that counselors brought them. We had several houses burned down, and we took those kids to dealers to buy them clothes out of discretionary money, not taxpayer money. We also did home visits which we're doing now, and Lynn Rigg would not let me take it out of at-risk, but when she left, I got to take it out of at-risk money. And what I've been told is South Euless is saving money to buy cafeteria tables. I don't get that. I don't understand why the district doesn't buy the cafeteria tables, and she can do some of the things that I do to help kids that belong to that school. There's some other elementaries that have to buy network printers, which I think the district should buy, and she could help the kids at her school. So the reason I brought this up, which I didn't get the numbers that was on here, these are different numbers than I got. Well,
Yeah, okay,
it couldn't be that far
I
apart.
bet I can explain that. You have to keep in mind also that these funds, as I said, they're not pulled into the general fund, so they're separate and apart outside the general fund. So every year, those funds roll forward. Well, we don't roll those numbers forward until after we have finalized audit numbers, which we just did for our financial audit, because if we roll them forward and then the audit numbers, when the auditors get through them and with them and finalize them and they're different, it's a mess. So you probably saw it prior to and then after. So, but those campuses, they can figure that out if they look at their ending balance and then look at their revenues minus their
At
expenditure.
the time I asked, which was when I put it on a month ago, 4 weeks? A South Side school had $300 and a North Side school had $15,000. And to me, as a board member and a former principal, are we not servicing all schools equal when a school may, and you said you try to make up the difference, but from the teachers and the secretaries, it didn't sound like it was being made up. Where this school had plenty of money to spend on what they wanted to help kids and do what they needed to do at school, discretionary money, not taxpayer money. And then the South Side, 2 or 3 schools didn't have hardly any money. To me, I don't think we should rob the rich and give to the poor, but I think as a district, we need to provide what's needed for that school to be successful, not using taxpayer money, but using some money to make all schools equal and have a chance to compete. I bought many lunches. I can't tell you how many lunches I bought. Finally, I got a cafeteria lady that would feed the ones on free lunch until we did the paperwork, which at the time took 2 or 3 weeks. Well, they would go without food 2 or 3 weeks. So I paid for them until I got a cafeteria lady that was nice enough to feed those kids. Well, if I didn't have that discretionary money, they wouldn't have eaten. So are we hurting our schools by them buying cafeteria tables and computers as opposed to helping our kids in the school be successful and wanting to be there? And maybe the attendance. My job, hey, I had Spunkmeyer cookies and snow cones and pup rally. I did everything I could to get the kids to my school because I had a great staff. And probably wouldn't have got the award over the weekend if it wasn't for what I got to do with the school with that kind of money. If I didn't have that discretionary money, I couldn't have supported those kids that needed support. And one girl we took to Dillard's, her mother was in prison, no electricity. We took her to get some clothes. She got the clothes, but wasn't going to the dressing room because she didn't change clothes anywhere but home.
Yeah.
Well, that was at Trinity. This wasn't a South Side school. What are they doing? So I was upset out at these schools, and I questioned how much discretionary money. Well, I think I got $300. I went, okay. And then I went to another North Side school, and I said, how much? They said $15,000. I went, what's wrong with this picture?
The way the programs are set up, some schools are able to generate more
No
revenues
doubt.
than others.
And
like
we
say,
can name
it's-
them, and I don't want to.
No.
Let me just address a couple things. I think, an extra printer. I mean, if the campus needs an extra printer and it's part of what we're going to allocate, then we need to be buying the printer. If it's an extra printer that they want for a convenience or something, it may not be something that we're going to purchase. But we have to be asked about that. I mean, and one of the issues we've had is because of COVID, we haven't had our IF money in a while either. And so that's a process that we will be probably going back to this year, because we will have IF money where the campuses can request it. One of the things about cafeteria tables, we have had no requests for cafeteria tables because the cafeteria tables they have at most of the campuses are still in good shape. We do have a number of campuses who want the newer cafeteria tables because they like them, but the cafeteria tables they have are still, it's not time to replace those. So some of them have made decisions that they may want to replace them. But we just found out that there is a possibility that there's interest in that. We can look at that and make some decisions, but I can't make any decisions because no one's come forward requesting anything.
Well, there's 2 on workman's comp. Cicely can tell you, we have 2 employees on workman's comp because their tables fell on them. So if they don't know they're broken, they're not looking at the
Well,
table.
no, I mean, and we definitely, I think it was Darla was showing me some cafeteria tables that, need to be replaced ASAP. And that's a process. We'll order those tables and we'll get those in. This is not replacing broken tables. My understanding, this is converting to the foldable tables that turn into the bleachers. And I get it. I get it that some of the campuses may want those. But if that's something we're going to talk about and that's going to be the new standard, then we need to talk about that. I mentioned this to other board members. We have some that are investing in their marquees. Is that going to continue to be something that the booster clubs invest in, or is that going to be standardized to the district? I think these are some things that we do need to look at to make sure that they're not using their funds on things that probably are our responsibility to keep them consistent.
But as you know, Bedford Junior High had their PTA buy the cover and the marquee, where a school on the south side won't have that money. So, where's the equity? Where's the equality on one school has all the PTA people building a cover and a marquee, where Bel Air doesn't have anything and can't even buy a marquee. I just don't understand, as a board member and a former employee, the difference and why they're can't have both of them have a nice entrance and a nice marquee. Then you say, well, the booster club or the PTA has to do it. Well, Bel Air doesn't have any money up here on one of these charts.
Well, that's extended day, and Bel Air doesn't
have any.
Yeah, they don't.
So if I had extended day at my school, I could buy a marquee.
Yes, but there's a tremendous difference in that title funding, so that they have the advantage to bring on programs through that.
But Title I, you can't buy a marquee in Title I funds.
No.
I don't think they can do
No,
it
that- but
Sunday
I-
either, can they?
And that would be marquee
Yeah.
would be an expenditure we raise an eyebrow out if it was coming out of EDA funds, so that's.
But I
one of
think
those.
that's where we're gonna have to look at what we can do for those campuses. You mentioned Bel Air a couple times. Bel Air does get a lot of support. Bell Helicopter supports Bel Air. We do have ways to find, Deanne and her group have been working on the Campus Champions to make sure that all of our campuses have the ability to make sure they can take care of their teachers, to get things like that. I think we can look at ways, but when we're talking non-taxpayer money, it's also limiting the control we're gonna have on that money, especially booster club money and fundraising money. That's gonna be limiting the extended day. If we don't reward the campuses with bigger programs, they're not gonna have bigger programs because it is a tremendous disruption to the campus. There's no incentive for those campuses to have those programs or support those programs, allow them to eat up all their rooms if they're not gonna generate funds from that. And that's the reality of that program. So there's a lot of factors that go into those dispersals, but those dispersals, we've also
tried to watch that title money, because we know those campuses that get a lot of title money, they have that money that they can use for the obviously appropriate cost. The campuses that don't, where they're going to generate additional money is an extended day.
As superintendent for the day, I think that I would tell that school that knew anything, that if that was perfect and worked well, they couldn't spend that money on that.
I don't understand.
Well,
So if
you know,
somebody wants tables and you don't think that's the appropriate use of the money,
if
then
they're all new tables,
then we should tell
they
them
want
that they
green
can't do that.
tables and they have blue tables. I want to get rid of my blue and get green tables. I'd say, no, the blue ones are working fine. You don't need new you can't spend the money on green tables.
Well, and I agree with that. That's where I think we have to step in and say, at times, no, or we're going to, this is something we're going to control. When it's, this is the standard.
I agree with that. No problem with that.
So they can use the money to take care of their
But to
kids.
replace something that's good with something that's just as good is ridiculous.
Yeah, but I mean, that also kind of puts us in a weird position that if the PTA comes and says, we want to give this campus money to change the sound system in the cafeteria, then do we have to have a discussion, say, okay, are we going to approve that or not?
That's a donation of speakers, though.
Well, all this is a donation of
Yeah,
value
this is money
that
they
goes
have
into discretion.
This is money they have in an account that's not designated to anything. You can spend it on anything you want to. PTA hadn't said buy new tables. It's over here in a pot. I spend it on anything I want to.
But it's money raised through PTA or some other fundraising mechanism.
Walmart money, or it could be donated from different people that we get checks here, every week that's given to the schools. And it's, it sits over there in a fund that's not required to do anything.
So when the PTA gave money to Bedford Heights to build the covers, then why should we be upset if Bel Air doesn't have it?
That's fine. That's a
Because the
donation
same-
of a
That's the
cover,
same
though.
situation.
But
So it's,
what I'm
it all
saying
gets very
is
complicated.
another
because it
school
is
doesn't have a
discretionary.
PTA and doesn't have that ability to do that.
Well, I understand that, and it's not fair, but, yeah, I don't know how to fix it.
I think we're the board, is there something we can do, Joe, as a to make kids, we're building brand new schools. Why are we building brand new schools? Because the old one's bad. And now those kids are loving going to Oakwood Terrace. Probably scores are going up and everything. Well, in that case, I think they need new stuff in the old schools as they need new stuff in the old schools on the north side or whichever schools they are. I'm just saying, what I've been told by people in other schools that have less money, they can't do as much as the ones that have money. And I want to know, is there a way to solve that problem? That's the only reason I brought it up.
Answer that question.
Yeah, I completely agree that when we're spending district money, everything should be even across the board. Whether we're putting in tables at one school, they should match the tables at every other school if we're buying them. But I don't know how we tell parents that they can't put money into their PTA to do nicer things at their school. It's hard for us to be in the position where we say, well, you got money, but it's not fair because they don't have money.
You said from Bel Air and Bedford Heights, how is that's inequitable, but it's them choosing to do that for their school, where this one doesn't have that, or we can't make that.
But this school doesn't have any money.
So you
Yeah.
can't make that equal, though, is what I'm saying.
Yeah, I think that you have a point that this team can be watching those schools that don't generate those funds through fundraising and ensure that they're not missing out on some of the other things.
And that's what he said.
Exactly.
They make sure that they don't.
Well, and we're going to try and take care of them. I think the pieces that we have to do a little better job on is making sure they're not spending their money on things that we've already considered to be our responsibility. And again, I don't want them to not have enough printers, but why do they think they need another printer?
These are network printers, though.
But but whatever it might be, why do they think they need it if it's
Now,
not?
if they need another printer, just to need another printer, they need the money to do it. I agree with that. But I think certain things the district should provide. And I'm not sure how we solve, and that's why I brought it up. How do you solve that problem as a school district or board or the people with the money, the inequality of what the kids are getting?
Yeah, we know we have inequality from school to school, that we have schools that have a lot more money than other schools, and we try to fill in those gaps with things like you talked about with Bell and with our community sponsorships and with churches getting involved, and you try to fill those gaps however you can, but it's really hard when you're just like looking at, say, PTA donations to try to level those out in any other way than saying, you know, we're gonna use taxpayer money to level things up, and we're gonna start giving more money to this school for printers or for cafeteria tables, other than this school, because I think as a district, we gotta keep everything level.
Well, I
between-
think you
between
should,
what we're
I
spending
think
on schools.
Josh should go to every school and
Far
look at
as-
every cafeteria table and see which ones are broken and replace them. Period.
Yeah.
No, and we do a furniture order every year, and I think, like I said, one of the things that may have caused some of these things to fall off is the fact that we have not been able to do the what-if meetings. Because the thing about the what-if meetings, and they would occur in, the what-if meeting is, you know, what if we have any money, what do you need? And we would generate these requests. Well, sometimes the request would come in, and it's a request that we're like, well, that's not a what-if request. Josh, send that down to purchasing, that's just a purchase. Now, again, we send out furniture orders. If it doesn't come in, it doesn't, but some may be thinking, maybe I'm not gonna get it, so they're not asking. We've got to get them to let us know. I think it was Darla was showing me, she was appalled at the condition of a cafeteria tables. Darla's getting that replaced.
Yeah, I think that's happened, it certainly happened to me. I would assume it's happened to the rest of you, where you hear about something that a teacher or a coach has been living with just because they thought that was the way it was supposed to be. And when you, identify it and, sort of shepherd it through the process, you realize that they're just not turning things in as broken, or they're just not asking things to be treated. And when you say to them, this is not okay, you have to go through the process and fill out the forms and request for this to be replaced, then it solves that problem. And that could be the case here, I don't know.
Well, every year you get a capital improvement list, and every school lists what they want to improve over the summer on capital improvement. And they take the neediest one first, and they may not get to your bottom 10 or 5 or 4, but they put them all together and they start at the top and go down on capital improvement. I understand that, but, through COVID and stuff, I'm not sure everything's been equal over the time, and we had a change in leadership and maybe a change in finance that, Lynn Rigg wouldn't let me do the home visits, and Debbie Resler did. And now the district's doing it. And so all that and it entails, it's an environment of the school. We need to make the environment, no matter which school it is, a great environment for kids to go to. And if it's not being met, what can we do as a school district? UIL came in and said, you can feed players now. South Lake eats steaks, we eat hot dogs at Trinity. Both are eating.
Right.
I want to know that both schools in our district are eating something. It may be a little different, but they're both eating. And that's what I'm saying. I don't want Cadillac stuff at Bel Air that deal with us, but are they getting what they need to have a great school that kids want to go to? And I'm not sure that's being looked at. And so I wanted it brought up that this right here will mess your mind up. And what's reality is different. I just worry about kids wanting to go to school, because if they don't go, we don't get to teach them. And I know there's a lot of mobility at Bel Air, and where are we losing 200? We lost 200 kids over COVID, or what did our enrollment go down?
The total during COVID, 700.
Yeah. So, how do we get them back, and what does it take? And are we getting hot dogs? Yeah, that's what I want to know.
And here's the other thing if you get this question, please send them to their principals, because we're not getting those requests. And so if that information doesn't come, if they feel they need something, have they gone? If they've gone to their principal and we're still not getting it, let me know. But they've got to go to their principal so their principal can submit those requests, because we're not getting them. So we'll work on
I send them to Joe and to Matt. So that just needs to be a standard process. They asking you stuff like that, send them to Joe and to Matt, and you'll be done with it. Stay out of that business.
All right, any other questions? All right, thank you. SAT, ACT reports, Mr. Streeter.
There you go. So the timing of this report is actually great because it's going to answer a little bit of the data that we looked at for ERG that Heather reported to you a few minutes ago. And so I'll just walk through this with you. So 2022 college admissions and test scores, I want to remind you that this is for seniors only. And so this report is based on our high school seniors from 2022. Important to note that students are only counted once, no matter how often they've been tested, and it's their last test score that's reflected. Now remember, college admissions is different. A college can look at the students' SAT scores and students can submit different portions of it and select the highest portion. But for this report and the data that we collect, this is the criteria that we use. Also, a reminder that HEB administers school day SAT to all juniors, and last year we started that program. I believe we're doing that again on March 1st of this year, and so that is new. Other districts have been doing that for a while, and I think you're going to see that has impacted our data a little bit negatively. However, I think we'll rebound as we begin to grow and learn as we do testing for all students. Also, I know we've talked about this in the past, or you've heard this, that we do also offer the ACT school-wide. The number of students that take that is very small, probably less than 200 on average, and that partly is due to our 8th graders that take biology at Central. They have to take a high-stakes test in order for it to count because they don't take the EOC. And so those students take that, but we also have some students that you'll see in the data that also took the ACT for different reasons. The ACT is heavy on the science and math portion. Dr. Harrington, did you?
They take the EOC, but they take it in eighth grade.
Yeah.
And they have to have that test 9 through 12, so that forces them back.
Correct, for federal accountability and state accountability. So if you look in 2021, so this would have been a year of COVID because that would have been seniors that graduated in 21, but they would have taken the test in 2020. So our numbers are lower there, and you can see the increase. We went from 514 students to 1,219. Now, all of you know that when you add more students to any testing group, your initial average typically goes down, and that trend, we saw that for both reading and math. We dropped in our percentage, not in our percentage, but in our actual scores. When you look across the state, that stayed pretty flat, but the number of students at 225,000 versus 243,000, that percentage is much different than 500 to 1,200. And so you didn't see that flattening out or decreasing the same way. And then if you look at the national average did go down a few more points, especially in math, when you look at that.
Okay, so reading and math, that's a score, whereas above that is an actual count.
Yeah, so if you're looking at reading, yes, ma'am. So in 2021, we had 514 students tested. Their score was a 561 in 2021 and a 508 in 2022. Oh, yes. Okay, does that make sense? So we're looking at scores as we go from left to right. When you see the reading and math, that's the actual score that our students earned on an average.
So perhaps next time you can write the word score or make that a different color so that
Absolutely.
Well, and it just happens that our number of students is very similar.
Yes, yeah, I thank you. Don, I'm glad you asked that. That is a little confusing. Yeah, we'll color code it a little bit differently for you in future reports. Well, that's why I was a science teacher. No, I'm just kidding. So if you look at the bar graph, you can see that the average at Bell was 517 and 503 at Trinity, and this is for the reading and writing portion, and then as a district, 508. And then in math, if you look to the right, the scores are almost identical in both reading and math.
And we'd love to see those scores closer, but obviously, look at the scale on there. There's not, that chart makes it look like a huge difference. It's just 10 points on that math side, but I would prefer that they were right together, but that's not a huge difference.
And Conrad, don't forget, board, a lot of schools cherry pick the kids.
Oh, well, yeah, and so I want to be clear about that.
Other district, you mean?
Yes, so for example, by going to school-wide, and I'm going to offer an opinion, I'm not going to offer data for that or research, but it's kind of like taking an AP class or a dual credit. By having all of our juniors take the test, it is creating an opportunity for them to look at college readiness. And so we want our kids to take the SAT, and that's why we're paying for it, and we have, you know, the participation rate eventually will be close to 100% of our juniors that we do that for school day. And so that's an investment on our part, but as Andy was making reference to, I certainly can get our scores to above the national average very, very quickly if I look at IB and AP and we force those kids. And that data has been done around before, and that happens, and we're not going to do that because we're interested in what our kids are doing. This is a snapshot, and also we're evaluating what are we doing next now that we've done school-wide testing only 1 year. We're going to do it a year or two, and then we'll do with everything, PDSA. Do we need to offer some courses and or some practice tests prior to the examination? Yes, sir. That's correct.
If you're going to junior college, you don't need to take that test.
Yeah, or you may not take it as seriously.
Right, and counselors would say that.
Yeah.
If you're in the counseling office and you're going to junior college, well, you don't have to worry about SAT. But now Trinity and Bell were paying for it and hoping they go from junior college to.
Absolutely.
And we
Fred?
also need to be looking at ranges a lot more than, because I mean, if Holly was doing this report, we'd be seeing all these categories. So, you know, it really matters how many kids fall in the 400 to 500 versus fall in the 600 to 700, right?
I think I just got called out, Holly. Thank you. We'll do map testing data. No, so here's what I don't know, and I'll find out with Gail. When we receive our scores, I don't know how it's broken down, but let me find out how we receive the data. I can't say yes or no whether we get it like that or not.
I don't know.
But I can certainly find that out, and if we do, then we'll provide you more details to the range and the number of kids, but I don't know.
But if you want to make actual improvements in terms of college readiness, you have to know where those kids are falling, so that you know which kids need the help to
Well,
get to that next
we are
level.
able to look at student data.
Okay.
Yeah, I just don't know if it's reported
We've
that
looked
way.
at it differently before. We've pulled just the top 10% kids out before and looked at it. You know, we knew that the scores were going to go down, but that wasn't what was the most important thing. The most important thing was we needed to be offering this test to every kid during the school day when they would have access to it. They didn't need to get up here on a Saturday. Yeah, or worry about get the fee waiver or anything else, that we would take care of all that. So this is access for all of our kids, and I'm quite pleased with the scores, but I want them back up. Let's everyone, let's trend up. The thing about being exempt in reading and math and being college ready, whether you get your TSI through SAT, ACT, or the TSI. That means I can go to TCC and I can take classes right now. I don't have to take the remedial classes. And I think that's, you know, if I'm going to a big-time four-year university, yeah, I'm going to take these tests and I'm going to score really high. But for a lot of our kids, it's that first time at TCC, if I'm not taking credit classes, will I come back? And getting these kids to qualify and getting them in there right off the bat is huge. And this is more opportunities for kids to get that chance.
Well, it's also a cost savings. If they're able to do the TSI, they don't take remedial classes, which saves them from paying for that at TCC or some other junior college. And back, I think to your point, Don, so even for our college kids who are four-year ready, this is a great opportunity because, as Dr. Harrington said, we're casting a net and we're getting everybody in there, but we're paying for it. And we're taking the school day to do it. And so it incentivizes that. And it's maybe some kids who would be hesitant, or parents, or problem getting them to a Saturday testing center, we're doing it on campus. And I think that's a great thing for all kids.
They don't even know that they're gonna do so well and they end up doing, wow, maybe I am college.
Well, and that's the thing too, you never know how a kid performs until they actually take the test, because we do have kids who would say, I'm not ready for that. Yeah. Yes, sir.
So, while I totally applaud that we're having all our juniors take the test, is it advantageous for us in future reports to maybe separate out juniors and seniors?
Well, okay, so this is seniors, but they took it during their junior year.
Oh, got
So
it.
I'm just reporting this year's class of 2022, but they took it last year as juniors. Does that make sense? Okay, so we are doing that.
It's their last test, so for some of them, it's not the one we gave them, they've taken it again.
Got it.
Correct, and remember, like I said, it's the last reported one, but you could have taken it more than one time, but we only get the score from the last one.
Okay.
Question, Chris?
So of the 12-19,
Yes, sir.
what percentage is that of our seniors?
I'll do the math for you. I don't have it off the top of my head, but it's 80% maybe? Yeah.
So
Yeah.
where are the other 20? If they were, were they not with us when they were juniors? Why did they not take it?
Well, that was COVID. Yeah, we still had a lot of absenteeism, because I have to go back and see when we took that test last year and to see if that date was on a high absence date, but I'll find that. That's a question I asked Gail also, and she was researching that. I'm not sure why we have a discrepancy in the total number of graduates, but it could be because of our mobility rate, and this is a stretch, so I'll confirm what I'm saying. It could be that some of the kids that are with us now weren't with us as juniors, and it could be that we had kids who took it as juniors who have left, and so when we run the report, you're going to have a discrepancy in number of students. Does that make sense? Yeah. 2021. Okay. So this is just another way to depict the data, and you can see that, you know, as predicted, this is not any surprising data to us. We had a downward trend, and this is just showing you what the bar graph already did. That's in reading and writing. That's in mathematics. And if you look at the state, it had a slight downward trend, but again, that's a very different from going to whole school compared to students that were selecting to take the SAT. And then we did want to show you the ACT data as well, even though it's much smaller. So if you look at 2021 and 2022, you can see the number of students tested. Down below is the average score. So we did go up in the ACT from a 23.3 in reading to a 24.6, and in English, 21.8 to a 23.2, and in math, a 21.9 and a 23.7. What I found interesting is when you looked at the ERG data, when I looked at this data initially, I was really pleased because that's 2 points. That's quite a bit. The ACT is very difficult to take if you haven't taken it. It's very science and math focused, and it's a challenge. What's interesting, though, is ERG, they actually predicted us to do a little bit higher in the ACT. So that's an area that we'll look at and see what is it that we're doing. But again, we have a very small sample size of number of students when you look at our district that are actually taking this test. And then if you just look down, you can see the same trends across the United States. For the nation, for the state, we had 88,000 plus in 2021. They haven't reported the total number yet for 22. But if you look at the average for the state, it actually went down slightly in all three categories where we went up. So I was pleased to see that. And then if you look at the national scores as well, they all went down slightly where we went up. And so that, let me go to the next one. And then for science, you can see we went up there as well. And then if you look at the state, they went down, and in the nation, they went down as well. So I think that's very positive for our students who are taking the ACT. And then again, this is just another graph to depict the two campuses. And we are looking at a little bit of this data as to, you know, why is there a discrepancy? Now, I will tell you, having been in two high school towns before, you can have 1 year where one's up and one's down. You can have 1 year where they're almost flat. So we need to look at this over the next couple of years to see if we're getting a trend. And that could be teachers, that could be students, it just all depends. I wouldn't want to use this single data point to be overly concerned. Dr. Harrington?
Well, and it's something to watch. It's a small group.
Yeah,
you know,
it's a
so
very small number of
you're
kids.
The possibility of fluctuating really increase with such a small testing group.
And here's the thing, a lot of kids are at Central that do take this test. So it depends. Maybe 1 year, a lot of them are going to Bell, and maybe 1 year, more of them are going over to Trinity. And that could absolutely sway those results because not all, but the majority of these kids are ones who are taking the 8th grade biology. Not all, but many.
So you're saying it's a Simmons effect?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
Yeah, exactly. But if you look at that, you can see we are trending upward in all three categories for both campuses and the district, where the state is flat. And again, in English, similar. And math, and then finally science. And then the overall composite, which I think that's great. If you look at the state and nation, they're very flat, and in fact a slight decline, and we are definitely moving up. And then any additional questions could be pointed to Gail, or any additional information I can provide for you, I'd be happy to.
Conrad, you know, here lately we've heard a lot of things on the news about colleges not taking the SAT anymore. Is there any other news or the trend, or you know anything where we're going and where we're heading on that?
So right now, it's a little bit all over the place still, Andy. There are still many large universities that are still waiving that. I'll be surprised if that trend continues, at least at some of the more larger four-year universities and prestigious universities. But I watched Dr. Harrington's head kind of nod back and forth. It is all over the place, and I wouldn't be able to predict right now who would and who wouldn't. I think that was definitely a reaction to COVID. We'll see as universities fill up and how spaces are taken, how they respond to that.
Yeah, and I'm going through this process right now, you know, because I got a kid going to college next year, and they may say that they're not requiring them to turn in ACTs, but then when you start going through the application process, it's like, oh, you want a scholarship? Well, you have to have a 30 ACT, or you have to have a 28 ACT. Oh, you want to be in this program? Well, we require a 25 ACT. So they're still requiring them.
Yeah.
You still have to hit minimums.
Slowly it's changing.
And it may be a college by college, you know, within the university. To get in the university, they don't require it, but the particular college may be looking at it to get you into whatever degree of study you want to go into. So
I think it's east coming west.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I don't know how you, in Texas, you have to be a qualifier, so you're still gonna have to have a score, whether it's
That's correct.
SAT, ACT, or the TSI. And so, there's still a lot of things connected to that. But yeah, it has been confusing because you do hear people talk, and they're saying you don't need it, but it's exactly what Matt is saying. Well, you need it if you want to go beyond just getting in. Yeah.
Yeah. And again, as with all the data that you've heard this evening, this is another data point for us to look at, and how are our students performing against ourselves and then across the state and the nation. And so always room for improvement. But I do think the SAT, before I close, I do think that's an area that we can look at more closely and close the gap a little bit. And part of that is just preparing our kids because we've never gathered that data. So now we have a baseline and we can go from there. Anything additional before Thank you for your time.
Yeah. Matt, I thought you were going back to finish your senior year the way you said that.
Yeah, I probably should do it again. Let's see, financial statements for the month of December 2022. Mr. Williams.
Okay, we're going to be looking at our financial statements for the month ended December 2022. We'll start off with the general fund. As you can see, in the past months, we've talked about the expenditures exceeding the revenues because our tax collections hadn't started coming in. Well, that's reversed itself. Our revenues now exceed expenditures in the amount of $39,326,000 and some change. One interesting thing of highlight with the general fund is we are showing increased investment interest year to date in the amount of $944,857, and that's as compared to last year at the same time that was only $45,897. So that is a bright spot, which will help offset a little bit what we talked about earlier, our lower ADA it's gonna impact us on the revenue side of the equation. I mean, we're well within our budget as far as how we're spending our money within our functions and whatnot. But that ADA it's gonna impact our revenue, which is yet to be determined, but a little bit lower enrollment than we projected, plus just kids not showing up. The ADA impacts us has a greater impact than actually even enrollment does, so.
And I'll intercede just 1 second. You're hearing a lot from a lot of districts who are wanting to move away from ADA to enrollment.
Yes.
And we were never on board because we were running at such higher ADA than everyone else. We were actually afraid that it would hurt us because if they averaged it out, we were above the average. And we're running our functions, but we're not able to maintain the numbers we had in the past. And if this new set of conditions is what's going to be moving forward, then that enrollment funding would be may be better for us also. But that's something that is out there. So this is not an issue that we're having. This is an issue everyone is having right now.
And total expenditures as of 12/31 were at 32.7%. Of course, that's where we're at in the school year. That's below the 33% for this time of year that we should be at. So the general fund is performing as expected on the expenditure side, maybe not on the revenue side, but we will deal with that as it comes. The rest of the report. You're looking at payroll of $55,244,667. That is at 84%, and as we say every month, this number it'll slowly creep up towards that 87 to 88% that we will end up in, as our payroll expenditure by the year end. Our other large expenditures are utilities in the amount of $1.280 million. That's about 2% of the budget. Instructional supplies, $862,522 is running at about 1%. The food service fund, they continue to do well, although shorthanded. We're like a broken record player. Revenues do exceed expenditures in the amount of $724,467. Total expenditures as of 12/31 are at 20.92, and of course that's below 4/12 of the year of 33%. As I said, that budget and fund continues to do very well. Mariella continues to do a great job. Debt service fund. Debt service revenues, like general fund revenues, have increased with tax collections. We now have revenues that are greater than expenditures in the amount of $22,387,129. The first debt payment of $7.28 million says will be due February 15th. It was due. It has already been paid. We do like to pay that a little ahead of time so that we can get confirmation that they have received it, because it's not a good thing to be late on those payments. Has not good consequences. The second and final debt payment will be $29.5 million, and that will be due August 15th. Our total debt service fund for the year owed will be $36,781. And as we've talked about, as we get more and more tax collections in and we have some excess revenues, we will be defeasing some of the bonds that we talked about doing earlier on. Pre-K CK program revenues exceed expenditures by $291,643. We have received 64.53% of the budgeted revenue as of December 31st, so that fund is doing very well. Expenditures as of 12/31 are at 29.61%. So that fund is doing very well and as expected. Special revenue funds. Total expenditures as of 12/31 are at 24.87%. Overall expenditures right now are exceeding revenues, which is mainly due to a lag in TEA draws for corresponding expenditures. The way the title special revenue funds work, we actually spend the money and then request to be reimbursed for that. So we just haven't got those funds back yet. So those funds are tracking normally as expected. Campus activity funds, revenues exceed expenditures by the amount of $1,014,654. Those funds are performing very well. Students are doing a good job with their campus activity fund, raising money. The 2018 bond fund, those expenses are exceeding revenues in the amount of $1,494,11. As we talk about every month, we don't put any money into there unless we sell some bonds, which we have none to sell right now. So the majority of these funds are being used on the Bel Air rebuild, except for I think technology still has a little bit left from the 2018 bond fund that they are spending on some various things. The possible bond, 2024 bond series. This is kind of what we touched on earlier, Chris. Of course, we won't get any revenues into this fund until we call an election and pass an election and sell some bonds. We're just keeping track of these expenditures. So you can see we are up to $286,072 through the end of December. Locally defined capital projects fund, the expenses also exceed the revenues by the amount of $121,015. Again, these funds, as you know, unless the board chooses to move funds into this fund, there are no new revenues coming into this fund. These funds are currently being used to fund the other half, basically, of Bel Air Elementary rebuild, the Transition Center remodel, which is, I walked that building the other day. It's coming along nicely, moving right along. And the admin parking lot, which we have pretty much done, except for them doing some correcting some issues and stuff that we had with some of the around the area. And then we will have some new funds start bringing funds to you, some tonight possibly, I think, that are came out of the October facilities meeting that we'll start looking at that'll come out of this fund in the future. Any questions on that?
Any questions on the financial statements? All right, thank you. Budget transfers and amendment request, February 2023.
Budget transfers for the month are very minimal. I think most of them are to move some money around in the functions to accommodate some travel expenses in some different areas for people to go to some needed trainings and whatnot. So, like I say, very, very minimal in the big picture of things.
Any questions on transfers? All right, 7.03, amendment number 6 to AIA B 102-2007, standard form of agreement between owner and architect. Were there any questions on this? All right, college entrance examination board for advanced placement examination fees. Any questions on these fees? Nobody? Okay. 7.05, FRP 22-23 district-wide document management system.
Yes, that's true.
Mr. Jackson.
Good evening, how y'all doing? I'm here to give you an update or a kind of, excuse me, I got nervous there for a second. To give you a explanation of the document management system and explain what a document management system is and how we came to evaluate one and assess the need for a document management system. I was asked by Dr. Harrington to look into a product that would automate some of the district's paper processes. And I put together a team of 8 state committee members, stakeholders from the district from several different district departments to evaluate the need of a document management system. We also used an EII that John Hollis had conducted for student records management system. The committee come to the conclusion that a need was there for a document management system. And after the need was assessed and what we wanted to accomplish with it, we reached out to purchasing and had an RFP created for the document management system. And out of that, we determined that Laserfish by DocuNav was the product that met the district's needs. And what Laserfish is a system that will take our paper documents and our digital documents and turn them into, we'll digitize the paper documents so that we can turn those documents along with the digital documents into workflows. And what a workflow is where you can take a document, any document, whether it be paper or digital, and create a workflow to automate a process. An example on that would be like an HR onboarding process. Right now, they use a lot of paper processes so that they can do that onboarding. A new hire can be given a web link or an email or form to go to, complete the entire onboarding process with one point that they go to start it. They can complete that process, submit that process, and the entire process can be done automatically. Those workflows and processes can be used in several different departments. We plan to use the Laserfish product in HR, purchasing, accounts payable. Just about any department within the district can use this product. You can take virtually any document, whether it be paper or digital, and convert that into a workflow to automate a process. That aligns with the district's goal number 2 of effective and efficient. It helps with manpower because a lot of these processes can be automated they complete, say, the first step. It is submitted to an individual. They get an email. They approve that process, and then that person can continue on to the next process. And so it's completely automated, and it helps with kind of easing some of that paper and personnel work that is done by a lot of departments.
2 questions.
Yes, ma'am.
Is the year 2, 3, et cetera, cost just maintenance, or is there licensing?
Year 2 and 3?
Uh-huh.
Yes, the first year cost is for setup, support, licensings, training, and then year 2 and year 3 is just the reoccurring annual expenses. So there will be a reoccurring annual expense on this product of about $90,000 a year. And the original, the setup first-year cost is around $300,000 a year.
And is it cloud storage or on-prem storage?
It's cloud storage up to 5 terabytes to start with. And any of those numbers can be changed. We can increase our terabytes, our storage as needed. We chose 5 terabytes because that's about what we're using right now and what John Hollis has estimated what we needed to store all the student records once we digitize them and store them in the cloud. We also chose the cloud storage option instead of on-prem because it gives the documents accessibility from anywhere.
Terry, is that 5 terabytes about the guesstimate of what you guys think you need, or do you know?
It's a pretty, what we do is we calculate what John Hollis's EII determined that they would need. We calculate what we're currently storing, because a lot of these documents that we're currently storing that are already digitized will need to be moved into this system so that these workflows and these processes can be created within the system. So we calculated that based off what John Hollis recommended we needed and what we're currently using already.
Gotcha.
Any other districts around us using any of these?
Laserfish is it's probably the highly used product in the state of Texas. There are over 80 school districts within Texas alone that use this product.
Did you go to one of these districts and watch them?
We did reach out to 2 or 3 districts, Northwest, Mansfield, I believe was the other one, and talked to them. We've got a lot of feedback from the committee, people on the committee that knew other people in their same job at other districts that use the product. So we did reach out and talk to them and how they were happy with not only the product of Laserfish, but the company selling it to us, which is DocuNav.
Okay.
Do we have anybody on staff currently who's been through an implementation of microfiche?
The only one that I'm know of is, which was a committee member, I am drawing a blank, but not an official training. They used it probably for a year, and then they left that district and came here. So we don't have anyone at the district right now that is trained in Laserfish, but we do plan on dedicating a person in the IS department as a specialist in Laserfish during the training.
All right, so the actual project management of the implementation, that's part of that startup cost, so someone from the vendor will be here
Yes, sir.
on a daily basis, helping us get that set
The vendor
up.
will be here on a daily basis. They have packages that are already created from their experience with other school districts for HR and accounts payable and for purchasing that they have kind of pre-made, pre-canned, and they will take those and kind of personalize them and customize them to our needs. And there will be a person on staff helping us do that and helping each department get all of that process transferred over to Laserfish.
Yeah, because I know from my own experience in my little tiny company compared to what you guys are doing, I have some workflows that I have built in, using software, and it always takes a lot more time and a lot more energy than you're expecting it. It sounds really great when you start, but it's always a lot harder to get there than you expect.
When I reached out to other districts that have used Laserfish or a product similar to it, the ones that had a great success and talked very highly of it are the ones that paid for those extra features of having someone come out and train them and having someone come out and help them design their forms and design their product to customize it to their need. The ones that did not have a good experience are the ones who just bought the licensing, bought the product, and tried to self-teach themselves how to do it.
I think that's very important. Yeah.
And I come across 2 or 3 districts that had that experience and they regretted it.
Is the cost dictated in part based on the number of users?
Yes, sir.
Okay. How did we arrive at 330 users?
The 330 users are what they call as creator accounts. There's 330 users that can create content, that can create these workflows, create these automatic processes, and that was determined by the amount of people on the campuses. There's 2 to 3 personnel that on each campus that will need that ability to create that content, to scan that content in, and then the departments that will be using it, somewhere between 4 to 5 people, and also some technology people that'll be trained in either instructional technology or in information services that'll be specialists. So That number part of that number was generated through the EII that John Hollis did for the campus staff. And then we took kind of evaluating as a committee how many people we need per department, of how many people that we needed to help create this content. Now, that also comes with 2,000 viewer accounts, which a viewer account is when you create that process and then you send that form to a new hire, they are a viewer. So they're not part of that 330. So we feel that, and that is concurrent users. So that's how many people are using the system at one time.
Yeah, from my experience, you have to have an account that you're paying for, like a creator, if you want to create content or if you want to initiate a workflow. So if you're like, say everything's built out and HR wants to start an onboarding with somebody, the person who starts that process has to have a license, but the employee who you're onboarding doesn't need to have you don't have to pay for that
Correct.
license because they're just using the workflow.
Correct.
So through the renewals, if we find that more or fewer users or creators are necessary, do we have the ability to change that number?
Yes, sir. We have that ability to what we call true up every year when we renew that maintenance agreement, and we can add more users. We can take users away, and so that's completely flexible along with the amount of storage that we need. Because I anticipate this product being utilized by pretty much every department in the district. Once we get trained, we're able to train people how to use it, and we get very comfortable with the product, and people are going to see how much this product is going to help them in their day-to-day life by automating these processes and creating these web forms so that they can easily get this information out to people and share this information, that it will expand to pretty much every department within the district.
What is your timeline for implementation?
We're hoping to implement this. John Hollis is ready to go yesterday. We're hoping to implement this as soon as we can get them in here and get people trained. So we should be probably seeing our first, HR will probably hit the ground running also. They're very, very excited to use it, and they're probably the most ready to use it, to start converting things, and I would probably anticipate them by this summer be utilizing as much as they can.
Great.
Of course, it is HR, so they're quite busy.
You know, there's training that has to be done, but most users are used to seeing these documents in some format. They've done something that is very similar to this. It's going to be the creating, and it'll be one document at a time. That's the thing. I mean, and I say that, probably one document per department at a time, but they're going to begin that creating those. And once they're ready to use, we can use those as the pilot as we continue to create.
Yes. I anticipate we'll be in a kind of a pilot learning phase of this for the rest of the school year and probably halfway about this time into next school year. And then after that, we'll have the staff trained up on how to use it, how to support it. We will continue that support. Part of that annual agreement is for support so we can continue to improve on it every year. So it's not kind of a one and done first year. You have to get everything done in 1 year and then, you're on your own. We're paying for that ongoing support so we can continue to develop it.
Any other questions? All right, thank you.
All right, thank you.
All right, we have the next 3 items are all declaration of construction delivery methods for various projects. So we'll start with Bedford Junior High School Fire Lane improvements. Were there any questions on this?
Let me just clarify too, we had the resolutions for 7.06 and 7.07 had been reversed when they were attached. They have been corrected. So they had gotten attached to the opposite. They are in there correct now, so I just did want to clarify what you're seeing is been corrected.
Okay, no questions on 7.06 for Bedford Junior High. How about for LD Bell and Trinity High School baseball and softball fields? No questions? All right, 7.08, declaration of construction delivery method for minor projects and related activity. Mr. Kerbo, you gonna explain that to us?
Glad to be here to talk a little bit about construction in a different light. We're familiar with the competitive seal process as a construction delivery method. And the term construction delivery method is just a roundabout way of saying, how are you going to buy this construction project and deliver it as a finished project? Why they chose construction delivery method as the language in the statute, I don't know. We live with it. It came to us in 1997 when a lot of additional procurement methods were allowed in law, and this is one of them. We've used invitation to bid, which has historically been the only method to procure anything of a public nature, whether it's school business or other government entities. 97, like I say, ushered in about 7 different methods. And the procurement world either rejoiced or were shocked or awed or scared all at once because we didn't know what to do with these other methods. So what it is a more flexible method to procure things with the idea of being able to create value with the process here. So I sat with Josh and Dave Tapia about 2 or 3 weeks ago, and he had a long list of projects that we were trying to figure out how we're going to buy these things, how are we going to get started on these things. And they're all priorities for the district that has been established through facilities, meetings, and so forth. So we started going through the list, and the obvious ones were, you know, major construction. We knew those were going to be competitive seal proposal or construction manager at risk as those projects are defined. And then we come up with a list of minor jobs, minor projects that really don't fit the niche for a major construction purchase. It wouldn't attract the type of contractors or enough contractors to be able to competitively procure these things. So the natural result was, let's look at a different way of procuring these things. And the job order contracting process is geared specifically for these things here. So that's when we started having the discussion. Now, I know this district has been having discussion of introducing a job order contract for a number of years prior to my arrival here. But now seems to be the right time to do that, just because of the nature of these works. Will allow us to perform these more quickly, more efficiently, not use our own forces because we don't have the staff necessarily to do those projects with our own people. They have enough with just the regular maintenance items that they have to do and so forth. So nor do we have the expertise to properly scope the work or draft the scope of work to do that. So what we are recommending is having a managed job order contract program. And along with that, not only would we get the ability to use job orders to deliver these in what are called indefinite delivery projects, where we know we have that work, we just don't know how much, or we don't know when it's going to occur. We may need to paint a wall, we may need to recarpet part of a campus for, due to flooding or something like that. So those types of projects come up from time to time, and we need to have a quick way, yet a way to efficiently procure those and control our costs. So the job order contract method will do just that. Now, there's 2 ways you can use the job order contract. You can manage it yourself, and there are a number of job order programs that are approved for use by school districts. You can do your own job order. We don't have the expertise to do that. It takes a lot of time and effort to be able to do that, and we don't have just a dedicated area or a job person to do just that. So the natural thing to do would be to bring in a managed job order contract where we get a program administrator or a project administrator that will help us create the scopes of work for the individual projects that we have and submit those out to qualified contractors that are approved through a job order program, and it's indexed to a price index that controls the cost and maintains a unit price per trade, materials, whatever we're tying the order or the work to. So the scope would be to define the work, calculate or factor out what is required to do the job, and then put that out to bid for our competitive pricing for those particular projects. And then we'd have projects that we can move forward with the project. Any project that exceeds $100,000 would come to the board for approval. Any project that's underneath that, we could move along with it as needed. So it's intended for, the law states that Job order contracting is a procurement method used for maintenance, repair, alteration, renovation, remediation, or minor construction of a facility where the work is of a recurring nature, but the delivery times, the type, and quantities of the work are indefinite. So the operative word there is indefinite. We know we need the work, we just don't know when we're going to need it and how much we're going to need. So that's what a job order contract does for the district, and allows us to free up our own staff to be able to do those routine maintenance items that they're on, instead of spending time trying to create and draft a scope of work that is complete, and trying to locate qualified contractors to be able to participate in our processes. Yes, ma'am.
So how do we come to decide to use Gordian?
They're available. First off, they've been doing this for a long time, and they're available through a cooperative contract. I've looked at them when I was at Dallas ISD, and again when I was at Carrollton Farmers Branch, and they currently are managing a job order contract in Dallas ISD and several other districts as well. So by the nature of their experience, which we will gain through this process, and the fact that they're available on a cooperative contract is the reason why. We've been, like I say, we've been looking, this district's been looking at them for a long time. They actually submitted something prior to COVID, and then that kind of just got tabled until we regrouped, and now that we're ready to move forward for some projects that will make it easy, or great candidates for a job order program. Another advantage that we gain by going through this project or program is that we will get a customized job order trades list and index pricing customized to our district's needs instead of a national or a regional index. And that will allow us the opportunity to involve more local contractors to participate in our specific projects.
And how is the manager, how are they compensated?
They have a fee structure based on the services that we require or request. The initial fee is a license fee that comes with use of the system. Once it's created, then we go in and we cost out a job, and that fee is 1.95% of the value of the work. And then the job order development fee, that's when they create our job order program with our indexed or with our unit prices indexed to our area, and that's 3.05% of the the cost of the work. Then they also have program management fee, where if we need somebody to oversee a project for us, much like an architect or an engineer would do out in the field, there's a fee for that. That's only, again, as needed. They will also perform job order assistance from existing job order contracts that are available to us, and that's at no fee. In other words, they'll help us create a scope of work, issue it out to bid, and we'll get a price proposal from multiple vendors and be able to get competition that way and move through the process. Then there's no fee for them doing that for us on our behalf.
So, Dr. Joe, I think this is a great idea, by the way. This is excellent. Mr. Gary mentioned that anything above 100,000 be presented to the board. I don't see anything written in this about that. Is there any concern about that?
That's our normal
Is it just our normal process?
Yeah,
Okay.
that's what, the 100,000 is just, if it was below that, I mean, we'd be moving forward with
Perfect.
the project. It was just that.
Yeah.
Any other questions?
Before I go, I'd like to take the opportunity to introduce Byron Jones. He is with Gordian. He is our account rep assigned to us, so he would be instrumental in moving this if approved.
Hello.
Thank you.
Been a long night.
All right, we're ready for action items. 8.01, consider approval of order of election for May 6th, 2023.
All right. As you are aware, at least some of you are aware, this is a board election year. And the district decided I don't know when, years ago, that they would have an election every odd-numbered year for 4-year terms on the May uniform election date. So we have now reached that point in time where I believe we have to, before the 78th day before that uniform election date, we have to call an election. The board has to call for that election. So that is where we're at right now. I believe that date we have to call it before is this Friday, which is also the last day for somebody to file for a place on the school board. So that is where we're at, and that is what we have presented before you, is to consider approval of the order calling for that election.
All right, any questions? All right, I will accept a very long motion.
I move that the board call an election on May 6, 2023 to fill places 1, 6, and 7 of the Board of Trustees for the Hurst-Euless-Bedford Independent School District. The board approves continuing joint elections with political subdivisions located entirely or partially inside the boundaries of Tarrant County and authorizes the administration to negotiate a contract with Tarrant County Elections Administration to conduct the May 6, 2023 election.
Second.
I have a motion, a second, for the board to call an election on May 6, 2023 to fill places 1, 6, and 7 of the Board of Trustees for Hurst-Euless-Bedford Independent School District. The board approves continuing joint elections with political subdivisions located entirely or partially inside the boundaries of Tarrant County and authorizes the administration to negotiate a contract with Tarrant County Elections Administration to conduct the May 6, 2023 election. Please vote. That motion passes, and we have a form that we all need to sign stating as such.
And there's a blue, they want it in blue. And the very first top left is for the board president. Everyone else can sign in, any of the members.
All right, while that's being signed, we will consider approval of HEB ISD resolution authorizing employee pay for inclement weather days. Ms. Tuttle?
I just wanted to highlight some of the major parts of this resolution, including compensation for full-time employees who had to leave early on Monday, January 30th, to commute home safely, and then for our evening custodians who were required to report to work on the evening of February 2nd prior to the school closure being called for the 3rd. That would include compensation for those who were unable to get there safely or who had to leave early. And then additionally, compensation for all full-time employees from January 31st through February 3rd without having to work the 2 inclement weather days in employee calendars. And finally, authorization for Dr. Harrington to designate up to 1 additional day of compensation should that become necessary, so that employees can be compensated in a timely manner. Are there any questions?
I don't know if I have any questions, but just a statement and conversation to fill the board in. Like many of you in the Friday update, sit down and do my homework, and I fire off a set of questions to Dr. Harrington, copy Matt on them, and then that usually stimulates a conversation that gets pretty much discussed before we get to this board meeting. As if it isn't obvious, I've been asking lots of questions. So those conversations ended up, I had 2 conversations with Cicely about, first off, I think this is awesome that we do this and do this waiver for our full-time employees, but I had a question about long-term subs and extended day and 2 of those meetings with Cicely, I've been clarified that extended days in a very specific fund, which we've looked at here tonight. And then I got some clarification on long-term subs, because I was a little concerned with our part-time people that may have planned to work that week and they're not getting paid for that. But Cicely has done some clarification. I'll let her even elaborate on it. In the case of long-term subs, usually they get extended from those periods of time. And we've made some adjustments, both this board and staff, to how we pay our long-term subs. And Cicely gave me some additional clarification, because I was concerned their pay increases, or at least the way I read it, increased on day 20. And I was wondering if we were shorting our staff because of the fact that these 4 or 4.5 days weren't being covered. But if you could just tell the board a little bit about what you told me over dinner.
Yes, so 3 years ago, when we updated compensation for substitutes, because of your generosity, we made a complete overhaul of that compensation. One of the things that we very strategically decided was that for individuals who sign up to work, who are degreed subs, certified subs, who are signing up to work in a teacher position, for example, that is going to last 20 days or more. That, in the past, prior to that point, we would start them at a rate, and then when they got to that next rate, we would raise their compensation. But we also felt like they're expected in those long-term jobs to do a lot more work, even on the front end. And so one of the things we changed about the way we compensate, or the way we set up that compensation, is once you agree to do one of those jobs, you go ahead and start at that rate. And that is the way that it is stated in our supplemental duty book as of 3 years ago, so that we can say thank you for the lesson planning and all of the things that go along with a long-term job. You might ask, well, what happens if the person comes back at 3.5 weeks? That's okay. You know, it was a 4-week job, and if something like that happens, we're always going to hold our end of the bargain. But what that does is it allows folks to know what they're getting into and to commit to that, and it allows us to compensate them from the beginning. It's also actually a lot easier for our payroll department and our HR department. We can always, if somebody decides after day 2 they're out, we can always go in and make that adjustment, because we have several weeks before that pay period ends. But going in and making all of those changes every day at the end of those 20 days was a lot. So that's the first thing that I was explaining to Mr. Campos, is that if someone was signed up to work that type of a job, that compensation's already in place. The second thing we discussed is that when an employee is on, for example, FMLA, and they have, let's say, 12 weeks that they're eligible to take, when we have something like this where there is a school closure, we do not charge the employee for those days toward their FML, because that would not be fair to do so. No one's working, no one is coming to work, and so we're not charging them. And when I say charging, I'm not talking money. I'm saying that does not impact their 12 eligibility weeks. And so what that does is, in many cases, whether it would be, you know, a maternity leave or something of that nature, in many cases that will extend that leave for them, which does take care on the other end of some of the concerns that Mr. Campos was asking about. The other thing that I should mention with regard to our subs is, some of you are aware that after the 20 days in a consecutive job, they are eligible for a $300 stipend. And so what they do is, at the end of 20 consecutive days, they complete a Google form, and our HR department sends that through to payroll. And so what we did, even prior to bringing forth any information, even for full-time employees, what we did is we sent a communication to those employees who were very concerned, now I'm going to have a break in service because of these 4 days, and I have to start back over on day 1. And we let them know that they did not need to start back over on day 1. So just for practical purposes, let's say that Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, and Friday would have been day 12, 13, 14, and 15. They're not starting on Monday that we came back from the storm. They're not starting back at 1. That day, whatever, you know, if Monday was 11, they would pick right up with day 12 on that Monday that we returned. So those are some things we did put in place to make sure that they were not, you know, there was no punitive action toward earning that compensation. You're welcome. Any other questions?
Okay, now I'm a little bit confused now.
So go ahead.
So help me out. if there is a full-time substitute that is slated to work through the end of the year, are they being compensated less by missing these 4 days?
So no substitutes are included in the current resolution that you are seeing tonight. So if they are not a certified teacher who we've hired on a contract, so maybe you're thinking of, for example, some of our folks who are working towards certification, and they are subbing every day, and they've been with us, you know, whether they started in August or they started in October to work toward that certification so we can employ them full-time. If they are not a full-time employee on a contract, then those 4 days are not compensated in, that compensation's not included in this resolution.
However, because I asked this question a different way, let's say I'm subbing for you and you're out on maternity leave for 4 weeks. Because of the fact.
Let's go with that.
Hypothetically speaking. Okay. Because of the fact that you are getting credit for the 4 ICE days, you will probably extend your maternity leave 4 days. So as your long-term sub, I'm still getting credit for the time frame that I originally signed up for.
Yeah, no subs don't get paid, period, if they're not working.
I was concerned in asking my question that we shorted the long-term sub the 4 days because you were going to come back on time, as we've agreed.
But I'm talking about long-term subs who are being shorted
Yeah,
because
all
they're going through the end of
subs.
the school year.
Yes.
Not
all-
because you're coming back.
Oh, right.
That is correct, Chris. All subs are going to miss out if they, whether they were short-term sub, long-term sub, they are missing out on those 4 days based on this current resolution. That is correct.
Now,
Well, hang on.
go ahead.
So I'm less concerned with subs who work some days and then,
Sure.
they're not here every day. But for our long-term subs who are basically full-time teachers, quote, full-time teachers, is there anything that would preclude us from bringing them under the umbrella of this resolution?
So they can't be brought under the umbrella of this particular resolution. But if there is data that you would like me to share with you, for example, in a Friday update of what that compensation would look like and what that would include, I can certainly do that. And that can be something we could consider at a future meeting. And the reason I say they can't be brought under this resolution is in order to add anything to this, we would have to remove it from tonight's board meeting, which means our payroll department will not be able to move forward with getting all of the compensation for our full-time employees in time for the end of this pay period.
So I would like to at least see the numbers on what that would cost and how many people that's affecting.
Absolutely.
Not subs who are not going to be with us through the end of the year, but subs who we know are going to be with us through the end of the year, what that would cost for us to compensate them for these 4 days as all other teachers are being compensated.
Okay. I'll be
And how many
happy-
people that affects.
I'll be happy to provide
And
that to you.
And then a resolution language that would go with that. Just making sure that we're able to do that.
Okay.
And I
We
would
can handle
second that.
Okay.
And Chris, we had lots of discussion of ideas for that maybe as a board we could discuss.
Great.
That I've had with Cicely.
Thanks for bringing it up, Fred.
All right. Any other questions?
Any other questions? And I will accept the motion.
I move that the board adopt the resolution as presented.
Second?
I have a motion and a second for the board to adopt the resolution as presented. Please vote. Did your vote come up?
Sorry. Sorry. I'm zoning.
It's late.
That motion passes. 8.03, consider approval of donations for the February regular board meeting presentation of certificates of appreciation. Were there any questions on the list? I'll accept the motion.
There's no motion. I move to consider the donation list as presented.
Second.
I have a motion and a second to approve the donation list as presented. Please vote. Who seconded it?
Fred.
And that motion passes. All right, down to other business. Does any board member have any items they'd like to request be placed on future agendas?
I have one item. The item is an update on transportation. And this was spurred on from our ambassadors meeting where we had the business ops, we had child nutrition, we had facilities, and then we had an abbreviated report for transportation because of the change in leadership. And I think it might be an opportune time once, and Joe, I defer to you on the right time to do this once we get someone in place. But the scope of what I would really like to see is an update on where we are with our bus drivers as far as filling needed positions, our recruitment and our retention, and how we're able to cover bus routes every day with these recruitment issues and open positions. 2 is an overview of our fleet. We just bought, a handful of new buses. I would like an overview of the status that our buses are in, what we can expect over the next couple of years as far as what needs to be replaced, the life cycle of our buses, and what can we expect. And I think that leads into the third is that there's seemingly been a theme this year of more buses breaking down on kids. And I don't know if people are just more vocal about it. I'm seeing a lot on social media of kids being stranded on their bus waiting for a mechanic to come help them. And I don't know if it's, if it's daily routes, if it's athletic, if it's fine arts. I would like some sort of look back over a year or 18-month period of time on what's really causing our mechanical issues and what can we as a board do about that. It may very well be that this is a normal, this year is no more abnormal than any other year, but it just seems like people are being more vocal about it. And if we have an overview of our drivers, our fleet, and what's causing this, it might give us a better idea of where we want to go with our transportation department when we get new leadership in there. And then, anything else you want us to know. So those would be the 4 scopes that I would like to see.
What's interesting is we had Brian scheduled to come and talk to you and give you guys an update prior to Brian deciding to take the job in Mansfield. So let us work on that and kind of talk through the time frame. Adobe has an interim transportation director in there at this time, but these are all factors that are going to be something that we're going to have to provide the new director as they take over. So I'll work with Dobie and we can put that together.
Who wants a second?
I'll second.
Third, already in soccer, bus broke down twice. I know that mechanic rode a bus to Dallas. I know another bus broke down in Dallas, and I had to send another bus after it. So it's kind of worried me that we're going sending these kids out on a Tuesday night or a Friday night, and they're stranded in North Crowley, Dallas, different places at the wrong time of night. So talked to Chris about it, and he put it on there, but it seems like we need to do something overall with the type of buses. What's amazing to me is a bus can break down at Wilshire and we can get there in 10 minutes. One breaks down in Fort Worth, Dallas, it may be 2 hours to get there. And that means those kids are in that parking lot by themselves with one bus driver for 2 hours. So I'm glad Chris brought it up. So,
all right, so we'll get that added on. You have all the notes that you need and information you need to pursue that. All right. Review of board activity chart. I've
No,
looked at-
whoop, I got something to put on the agenda.
Oh, okay.
Well, I really don't want it on the agenda, but I would like it looked at because, you know, I've lived this for this year, and I always heard the bad things about it, and now I'm going through it, and it's, with a seventh grader, I didn't hear anything. Now a ninth grader knows I'm on the, every ninth grade parent knows I'm on the board. Really, we need to look at the district to solve a majority of the problems, even academic problems, of creating ninth grade centers. Is it possible? I don't need it tomorrow, but I think we should look at, we can make 2 junior highs, ninth grade centers, and the other 7th and 8th. You would solve all the transportation problems. You could even help academics because you'd have one curriculum person passing on those things to the high school. So, so many parents are upset, and we've lost so many parents because of that. So I don't need it on the next agenda, but I think we should take a hard look at solving the problems that are making a lot of parents, great parents, leave this district.
Support that, and just note, Andy, it says future board agenda, so it could be whenever they're able to present.
Right, just to look at the pros and cons, and if you come in and say, we can't do da, I'm fine, but, to me, I know at Trinity, when kids came from 3 junior highs, they'd have 3 different teachers with 3 different, you know, philosophies on one subject, so, I think it helped academics, it helped athletics, and the parents said to me, I'm moving because if I move to Colleyville, he goes to high school in 9th grade. And he doesn't have to go to junior high here and get beat 100-0 every game.
Yeah, I support,
And Don, you've lived through it.
yeah, that's what I'm saying. I support looking into that and providing some data, information to us regarding the possibility to see if that could even
All right,
exist.
so we have a request and a second to add the potential for ninth grade centers to a future agenda. All right. Anybody else?
Thank you.
All right, reviewing the board activity chart, looks like we're pretty well covered for all the upcoming activities. 9.03, discussion for board goal number 3, advocacy. Is that gonna be you, Don?
Yes.
All right.
Can I have that board activity chart? As you all know, we've added onto the board activity chart, meeting with your legislator. And of course, we've all been given teams to meet with your legislator. So Fred and I want to make sure that we help you all and remind you to do so, and to give us an update as to when you plan to schedule your meeting with your legislator. But before you do that, I want to at least go over with you what has already taken place. And Julie, please help me if I misspeak. But February 7th, Julie and I met with Beth Van Dyne and Mark Vesey. So whoever had that goal, I know you and I had Mark Vesey together, so that one is taken care of as far as the initial meeting at least. February the 10th, we met with Tony Tenderholt, and you and I are with Tony Tenderholt, so that has been taken care of. And then on February 21st, Julie and I will be in Austin, and she's scheduled some meetings with, I believe, Brian Birdwell, Tan Parker, Salman Bojani, and Giovanni Cabriglione. So that leaves us with needing to make sure that we meet with 6 our legislators, John Cornyn, Ted Cruz, and of course you don't have to meet with them, but and/or their staffer, because most times it's more important to meet with the staffer anyway, but definitely to get that relationship started, they'll have more availability to meet with us than the actual legislator. Kay Granger, Kelly Hancock, Stephanie Click, and Pat Hardy. So for those who are assigned to these legislators, please let Fred and I know your plan of action as to when you plan to schedule and/or have scheduled. And of course, once you've met with them, that we ask that you would enter that information on the board activity chart.
All right, thank you for that update. Any questions on any of that? Okay, we're down to open forum number 2, no cards. Do we need a second closed session, Dr. Harrington? Then I will accept a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second? We are adjourned.
I finished can, so when you send it to me, if you haven't already, by tomorrow, I'll send it to you.
Yeah, I'm gonna
Oh,
submit
thanks.
tomorrow night.